In the beginning there was nothing. Not darkness, not light, not space, not time. Just an infinite vortex of chaos, an endless void where a reality had yet to take form. In this primordial nothingness, something miraculous occurred. An egg appeared, floating in the chaos, containing within it the potential for all existence. This egg would hatch, and from it would emerge Arceus, the alpha Pokemon, the creator of all things. Using its 1,000 arms, Arceus brought forth the fundamental forces that would shape reality itself. The first beings Arceus created were the architects of existence, Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. Dialga received dominion over time, its very heartbeat setting the rhythm by which moments would flow forward. Palkia was granted control over space, shaping the dimensions in which all things would exist. And Giratina, the most powerful and violent of the three, was given command over antimatter, the shadow reflection of all matter. Giratina is said to come to life from the darkness that is casted by Arceus. Every source of light must cast a shadow, and in the Pokemon universe, Giratina is that shadow. But Giratina's violent nature proved too chaotic for the newly formed universe. Arceus made a difficult decision and banished Giratina to the Distortion World, a mirror realm that exists parallel to our reality, where the renegade Pokemon would dwell in isolation, watching our world from the reverse side of existence. With the fundamental forces of the universe established, Arceus turned its attention to creating the essence of consciousness itself. 3 more beings were brought into existence, the Lake Guardians, Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf. Uxie embodied knowledge, the capacity to learn and understand. Mesprit represented emotion, the ability to feel joy, sorrow, love, and rage. Azelf carried willpower, the determination to act and the courage to face challenges. These 3 gifts would be imparted to all living beings that would eventually populate Arceus' creation, forming the foundation of sentient thought. The universe was now complete in its basic structure, time flowing forward, space spreading outward, and the spark of consciousness ready to ignite in whatever life would come. Arceus then created 3 sacred artifacts, objects of immense power linked directly to the creation trio. The adamant orb connected to Dialga, the lustrous orb to Palkia, and the Griseous orb to Giratina. These orbs held the power to summon these legendary beings and even bring forth their true primal forms. Their purpose remained mysterious, perhaps insurance should these powerful Pokemon ever need to be controlled or summoned in times of great crisis. After shaping these fundamental forces, Arceus created Mew, known as the ancestor of all Pokemon. This small psychic creature held within its DNA the genetic blueprint for all Pokemon that would ever exist. From Mew, through millions of years of evolution and diversification, every other Pokemon species would eventually descend. Arceus looked upon its creation and saw that it was complete. With the universe shaped, time flowing, consciousness sparked, and life ready to flourish, Arceus vanished, retreating to a realm beyond mortal understanding, watching over its creation but no longer directly intervening in its affairs. The ancient world, 300 million to 20,000 years ago. Untold millions of years passed in this new cosmos. The Earth formed, cooling from molten rock into a sphere capable of sustaining life. During this primordial era, approximately 300 million years before what we now call the modern Pokemon timeline, super ancient Pokemon began to emerge. 3 titans of incomprehensible power appeared, Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza. In what would become known as the Hoenn region, these primordial forces clashed in a battle that would shape the very geography of the planet. Groudon rose from deep beneath the Earth's surface, a being of pure earth and magma, expanding the land masses with every step it took. Its power over the ground itself was absolute, raising continents and mountains through sheer force of will. Kyogre emerged from the deepest trenches of the ocean, a leviathan of water and storm, carving out seas and filling them with endless water. These 2 titans became eternal rivals, each seeing the other as a threat to their vision of what the world should be. Their battle raged across the Hoenn region, Groudon expanding land while Kyogre shaped the oceans, neither willing to yield to the other. The conflict would have continued indefinitely, perhaps until one or both were destroyed, but a third force intervened. From the heavens descended Rayquaza, a dragon of the sky whose power dwarfed even these 2 ancient titans. Rayquaza struck them both down with overwhelming force, ending their battle and sending them into a deep sleep beneath the earth to recover from their wounds. Rayquaza itself returned to the upper atmosphere, taking on a new eternal duty as the guardian of the planet, destroying asteroids and space debris that threatened to strike the Earth. This battle had reshaped Hoenn entirely, creating the land-sea balance that defines the region to this day. Around this same era, another legendary Pokemon began its work shaping the planet. Regigigas, a colossal being of incredible strength, dragged entire continents across the Earth's surface, creating the current arrangement of land masses and carving out great mountain ranges. In the region that would become Sinnoh, Regigigas formed Mount Coronet, the great mountain at the heart of the land. To assist in its continental work, Regigigas created 5 servants and made its own image, constructs imbued with elemental powers: Regirock, Regiice, Registeel, Regieleki, and Regidrago. These golems worked tirelessly alongside their creator, shaping the Earth's geography according to some grand design only Regigigas understood. During this ancient period, around 300 million years ago, the Mew population reached its peak, with multiple Mew existing across the world. However, as eons passed and the planet continued to change, the Mew population slowly declined until only one remained, the last of its kind, carrying within it the genetic legacy of all Pokemon. Ancient species roamed the Earth during this time, Pokemon like Aerodactyl, Kabutops, and Rampardos, creatures that would later be found only as fossils, remnants of a bygone age. Around 2 million years ago, in what would become the Paldea region, a catastrophic event occurred. A massive crater formed in the center of the region, creating what is known as Area 0. This impact, whose origin remains debated, released tremendous energy into the surrounding area. The depths of this crater became home to unique environmental conditions and mysterious energies that would influence the region for millions of years to come. The event was so violent that it nearly drove an entire species to extinction. The ancient Pokemon Terapagos was almost completely wiped out, with only a single survivor managing to endure by transforming its entire body into a crystalline form, entering a state of suspended animation deep within Area 0, where it would remain dormant for nearly 2 million years. The meteor in Eternatus 20,000 years ago. 20,000 years ago, a meteor of unprecedented size streaked through space toward Earth. This was no ordinary asteroid, for within it slept something ancient and terrible, an extraterrestrial Pokemon of immense power. The meteor crashed into what would become the Galar region with devastating force. Some accounts suggest it struck in an area called the Crown Tundra, specifically at Slippery Slope, creating a massive cavern that would later be known as the Max Lair. The impact was cataclysmic, but Eternatus did not immediately awaken. Instead, it remained dormant within the Earth, its alien body slowly leaking energy that would seep into the ground and atmosphere of Galar over the next 17,000 years. The energy radiating from Eternatus' dormant form was unlike anything the Pokemon world had encountered before. These particles, which would later be called Galar Particles, or Dynamax energy, slowly permeated the entire Galar region, soaking into the soil, the air, and even the Pokemon themselves. This energy represented a fundamental force that would later allow Pokemon to grow to gigantic proportions, a phenomenon unique to Galar. But for now, Eternatus slept, and the energy it leaked was subtle, barely noticeable, gradually building in concentration as millennia passed. The Age of Worship? 10,000 years ago. 10,000 years before the modern era, humanity had begun to spread across the Pokemon world, forming primitive societies and learning to coexist with the creatures that shared their world. The 5 Regigolems, Regigigas' servants, had been wandering the world for millions of years, and humans had come to revere them as gods. These massive constructs were worshipped across multiple regions, with different cultures building shrines and temples in their honor. The Regi were seen as bringers of prosperity, protectors of the land, and symbols of ancient power that predated human civilization itself. However, as human societies grew more complex and their understanding of the Regi deepened, fear began to mix with reverence. The immense power these beings possessed, power that could reshape landscapes or destroy cities, became a source of concern rather than pure worship. Councils of ancient leaders made a momentous decision. The Regi must be sealed away. Whether this was out of fear of their power, concern that they might turn hostile, or simply a desire to control forces they didn't fully understand remains unclear. What is known is that the Regi were imprisoned in specially prepared chambers across multiple regions, bound by ancient magic and technology designed to keep them dormant. Regigigas itself was sealed in a temple in Sinnoh, while its servants were scattered and hidden, each locked away in remote locations where they could cause no harm. The seals were meant to be permanent, ensuring that these ancient powers would never again walk freely upon the earth. The ancient hero of Hisui, several thousand years before Legends Arceus. In the land that would become Sinnoh, then known as Hisui, an unknown legendary hero emerged whose deeds would echo through time. This hero traveled throughout ancient Hisui, befriending Pokemon and building relationships of trust and mutual respect. The hero's goal was ambitious: to collect all of Arceus' legendary plates, 18 sacred artifacts that embodied each of the elemental types and represented fragments of Arceus' own power. These plates were scattered across Hisui, hidden in dangerous locations, guarded by powerful Pokemon, and difficult to obtain even for the most skilled trainer. The hero succeeded in this monumental task, gathering all 18 plates through courage, skill, and an unbreakable bond with their Pokemon partners. With the full power of the plates in their possession, the hero did something that should have been amazable. They challenged Arceus itself. In a battle at the summit of existence, the hero fought against the creator of the universe and, incredibly, emerged victorious. Arceus, impressed by the hero's strength and the depth of their bond with Pokemon, bestowed a special gift upon them: The heroes' Pokemon partners, the creatures that had stood beside them through their journey, were granted special powers by Arceus, transforming them into what would be known as noble Pokemon. These noble Pokemon became revered figures in Hisui, worshipped and protected by the human settlements that would eventually form. The descendants of these noble Pokemon would continue to serve as guardians and protectors of Hisui for thousands of years, passed down through generations, their special powers making them stronger and more unique than others of their species. The people of Hisui never forgot the ancient hero, though over time, the specific details of who they were and what they looked like faded into legend, becoming stories told around fires and carved into stone tablets. The Celestica people and the migration to Hisui. Several thousand years before the events of Pokemon Legends Arceus, a significant migration occurred that would shape the future of the Hisui region. The Celestica people, a civilization from Sinnoh, an area connected to the Johto region, made the long journey across treacherous terrain to settle in Hisui. The Celestica were a deeply spiritual people with advanced knowledge of legendary Pokemon and the sacred forces that shaped the world. They brought with them their culture, their architectural styles, and most importantly, their religious beliefs centered around the worship of Arceus and the creation trio. The Celestica established themselves in Hisui, building structures that would endure for millennia. They created the Celestica Trail, a pathway marked with their distinctive symbols and writing. They constructed the Celestica Ruins, massive stone structures that served as both temples and observatories, places where they could study the stars and feel closer to the divine. The crown jewel of their civilization was the Temple of Sinnoh, later called the Temple of Coronet, built at the summit of Mount Coronet. This temple was designed as a place where one might commune with Arceus itself, a sacred space where the boundary between the mortal world and the divine grew thin. The Celestica worshipped what they called the three mighty beings of creation, Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina, though they knew Giratina only through ancient texts and warnings about the renegade banished to the reverse world. Above all these they revered Arceus, whom they called the almighty Sinnoh. In their language and tradition, Sinnoh referred not to the region, but to Arceus itself, the supreme deity who had created everything. The Celestica recorded their knowledge in hieroglyphics carved into stone tablets and painted onto cave walls throughout Hisui. These murals depicted Pokemon, told stories of ancient events, and even contained warnings about future dangers, messages intended for those who would come after them. The 3,000-year era, the Kalos War and the Darkest Day. 3,000 years before the modern era, two catastrophic events occurred that would forever change the course of history in two different regions. These events, separated by geography but connected through time and possibly through cause and effect, represent some of the darkest moments in Pokemon history. Understanding these events requires us to examine both carefully, for they are the key to understanding the interconnected nature of the Pokemon world's timeline. In the Kalos region, a terrible war erupted. Historical records are unclear about the exact cause of this conflict, but what is certain is that it involved Kalos and at least one other nation. Many scholars believe this war involved the neighboring Galar region, and indeed the historical animosity between the real-world inspirations for these regions, France and England, lends credence to this theory. Others have suggested Paldea or even Kanto might have been involved, though these remain unconfirmed. What cannot be disputed is the scale and horror of this war. Thousands of lives were lost, both human and Pokemon. The conflict dragged on for years, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Pokemon with special powers were gathered from across regions and used as weapons, treated as mere tools to secure victory. The king of Kalos at this time was a man known only as AZ, a tall, imposing figure who ruled his kingdom with wisdom and compassion. AZ had a beloved companion, a Floette, who held not the common flowers of its species, but a unique bloom called the Eternal Flower. This Floette was AZ's dearest friend, his constant companion, and the light of his life. When the war came, Pokemon throughout Kalos were conscripted into service, and AZ's Floette was among them. Despite AZ's position as king, he could not protect his friend from the demands of war. Floette fought bravely, but in the end, like so many others, it fell in battle. Days later, AZ received a small coffin containing his friend's body and the eternal flower it had always carried. The grief that consumed him was absolute and all-encompassing. AZ, a man of great intelligence and skill in engineering, channeled his anguish into creation. He designed and built a machine unlike any the world had ever seen, a device powered by a revolutionary energy source he called Infinity Energy. This machine could harness the life force of Pokemon, converting their vital energy into usable power. With enough energy, the machine could perform miracles that defied the natural order of death itself. AZ gathered the power from Xerneas and Yveltal to power his machine. The machine worked. Floette was restored to life, brought back from death through the power of stolen life energy, but the process had unforeseen consequences. Both AZ and Floette were transformed by the machine's power. AZ grew to an enormous height, becoming a giant among men, standing over 9 feet tall. More significantly, both he and Floette were granted eternal life, cursed or blessed to, live forever, unable to age or die. But Floette was not grateful for this resurrection. AZ's grief transformed into rage. He had sacrificed everything, damned himself to eternal life, committed unspeakable acts, and still he had lost what he loved most. In his fury and despair, AZ made a decision that would damn him forever in the eyes of history. He converted his life-giving machine into a weapon, the ultimate weapon, designed not to restore life but to take it on a massive scale. The weapon was massive, a tower of crystalline technology that glowed with terrible power. AZ activated the ultimate weapon and fired it. The blast that erupted from the weapon was visible for hundreds of miles, a pillar of light that shot into the sky before arcing down and crashing back into the earth with apocalyptic force. The weapon's power was indiscriminate and absolute, killing everything in its path. When it learned the terrible price that it had been paid, when it understood that countless Pokemon had been killed to bring it back, horror and disgust filled its heart. Floette looked at AZ, the being who had loved it enough to commit such atrocities, and felt only revulsion. Without a word, Floette fled, leaving AZ alone with the immortality he had purchased through mass murder. Graves now line what is known as Route 10 in Kalos, marking the final resting places of the Pokemon sacrificed to fuel AZ's desperate dream. Both sides of the war were annihilated in an instant. Entire armies simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the weapon's energy. Cities were leveled, forests were turned to ash. The war ended not because anyone won, but because there was no one left to fight. But the ultimate weapon's effects extended far beyond simple destruction. The energy it released was of a unique and powerful nature, similar to the energy used to create life, but twisted into something else. This energy interacted with certain stones scattered throughout Kalos and the neighboring Hoenn region. Stones that might have been evolution stones or something similar. These stones were irradiated by the weapon's power, transformed on a fundamental level. They became megastones, crystals that would allow Pokemon to temporarily surpass their normal evolutionary limits and achieve a form of power known as Mega Evolution. This accidental creation would have profound implications for the future, but at the moment of the weapon's firing, no one understood what had been created. AZ's brother, a man whose name has been lost to history, had been one of the architects of the war. Driven by greed and ambition, he had sought to claim Kalos for himself, leading a legion of followers in a bid for power. But when he saw what AZ had done, when he witnessed the devastation wrought by the ultimate weapon, and understood the magnitude of his brother's sin and his own role in creating the circumstances that led to this horror, something broke inside him. Consumed by guilt and seeking to make amends in whatever small way he could, AZ's brother took the ultimate weapon and buried it deep underground, sealing it away in a secret location where it could never be used again. He hoped that by hiding this terrible device he could prevent such a tragedy from ever occurring again. AZ kept the key to the ultimate weapon, a small device necessary to reactivate it. With Floette gone and his kingdom in ruins, AZ began to wander the world, cursed with immortality and carrying the weight of genocide on his shoulders. He would walk the earth for 3,000 years searching for Floette, hoping against hope that somehow, someday, his friend would forgive him and return. But for now, Floette remained gone, and AZ was left alone with his guilt and his immortality. At the same time, across the sea in the Galar region, another catastrophe was unfolding. Eternatus, the alien Pokemon that had been dormant beneath Galar for 17,000 years, finally awakened. The reasons for its awakening at this specific time remain a subject of debate. Some scholars believe Eternatus woke naturally, its long period of dormancy simply coming to an end. Others theorize that the energy released by the ultimate weapon in Kalos, which occurred at the same time, somehow triggered Eternatus' awakening. The timing is too precise to be mere coincidence, and the nature of the energies involved, both representing fundamental forces capable of affecting life itself, suggests a possible connection. Perhaps the ultimate weapon's blast, which was powerful enough to create megastones and reshape the fundamental nature of evolution, sent out shockwaves of energy that traveled through the earth and disturbed Eternatus in its slumber. Whatever the cause, Eternatus woke and immediately began absorbing energy from the Galar region to sustain itself. The creature's core, a powerful reactor that had been dormant for millennia, needed to reabsorb the Galar particles it had leaked over thousands of years. As it drew in this energy, a catastrophic phenomenon began that would be remembered as the Darkest Day. The sky over Galar turned black, covered by a massive storm of dark energy. Red light began to emanate from Eternatus' core, and from power spots across the region where Galar particles had accumulated. This energy caused Pokemon throughout Galar to undergo a transformation, growing to enormous size in a process that would later be called Dynamax and Gigantamax. These gigantic Pokemon went berserk, their minds overwhelmed by the sudden influx of energy and their bodies struggling to cope with their new size. They rampaged across the Galar region, destroying cities, trampling fields, and attacking anything in their path. The Darkest Day threatened to destroy all of Galar, rendering the entire region uninhabitable. The situation seemed hopeless, as no normal means could stop these titanic creatures or the alien monstrosity that had caused this catastrophe. Two legendary Pokemon native to Galar, Zacian and Zamazenta, awakened to face this threat. These heroic Pokemon, warriors who slept in the slumbering weald waiting for the day they would be needed, rose to defend their home. Alongside them came two human youths whose names have been lost to history but whose courage would save a nation. Armed with powerful weapons, a sword, and a shield that seemed to resonate with Zacian and Zamazenta's power, these heroes fought against Eternatus. The battle was fierce and terrible, shaking the entire region as legendary Pokemon clashed with an alien god. Zacian wielded its sword-like fangs and the power of the rusted sword, while Zamazenta defended with its impenetrable armor and the rusted shield. The two human heroes coordinated with their Pokemon partners, working together in perfect harmony. After a long and brutal battle, they succeeded in defeating Eternatus, forcing the creature back into dormancy. Eternatus' body fell back into the earth, sealed away once more, but this time weakened by the battle. Pieces of its body, crystalline fragments imbued with its power, broke off and rained down across Galar as wishing stars, objects that would be treasured by future generations. With Eternatus sealed, the Darkest Day ended. The sky cleared, the Dynamaxed Pokemon returned to their normal sizes, and peace returned to Galar. But the two heroes and their Pokemon partners were gravely wounded from the battle. They made their way to Circhester, where natural hot springs with healing properties could help them recover. After healing, Zacian and Zamazenta returned to the slumbering weald to rest, their duty fulfilled but their legend just beginning. The two human heroes, despite their incredible achievement, were largely forgotten by history. Future generations would remember the Darkest Day and the role of legendary Pokemon in stopping it, but the human element would be lost, replaced by myths and misconceptions. After the 3,000-year events, AZ, now a wandering immortal giant, traveled the world in his quest to find Floette and perhaps find some purpose in his cursed existence. His journeys took him to many regions, and he witnessed numerous significant events throughout history. Approximately 3,000 years ago, around the same time as the Kalos War and Darkest Day, AZ traveled to Galar. He witnessed the aftermath of the Darkest Day, seeing the devastation and perhaps recognizing parallels to his own actions with the ultimate weapon. This visit to Galar is confirmed through historical records, though what AZ did there or what he learned remains unclear. 1,000 years after the Kalos War, AZ's travels brought him to the Hoenn region. This visit would coincide with another significant event in Hoenn's history. Before arriving in the populated areas of Hoenn, AZ stopped at the Cave of Origin in Sutopolis City. There he planted a tree outside the cave's entrance as a gesture whose meaning is unclear. Perhaps it was an act of penitence, a living monument to replace some small fraction of the life he had taken. Perhaps it was simply a moment of gardening by a man who had too much time on his hands. Whatever his reasons, the tree would grow over the next 1,000 years. AZ's visit to Hoenn occurred at a crucial moment in the region's history. 2,000 years before the events of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, Hoenn was constantly besieged by meteors. These space rocks rained down on the region with unusual frequency, and one meteor in particular struck with tremendous force in the area of the Draconid people, wiping out their homes and creating what is now known as Meteor Falls. The meteors carried natural energy that awakened Kyogre and Groudon from their ancient slumber. Once again, these super ancient Pokemon began to battle, their conflict threatening to destroy Hoenn entirely. The Draconid people, desperate to save their region, made a fervent wish to Rayquaza, the sky dragon that had ended the first battle between these titans. Rayquaza heard the Draconid's plea and descended from the stratosphere. The dragon struck down both Groudon and Kyogre once again, ending their battle and returning them to dormancy. The Draconids were so grateful that they began to worship Rayquaza as their patron deity, building traditions around the sky dragon that would last for thousands of years. 1,000 years ago, another major meteor threatened Hoenn. This meteor was filled with natural energy similar to the ones that had struck 2,000 years prior. It impacted near what would become Sutopolis City, creating a massive crater. The energy release was so intense that it awakened Groudon and Kyogre once again. And once more, their ancient rivalry flared into open conflict. The Draconids called upon Rayquaza, and the Sky Dragon responded to their prayers. but this time something different happened. The meteor itself contained enough natural energy that Rayquaza could absorb it, and through this absorption, Rayquaza achieved what would later be known as the first Mega Evolution in recorded history. AZ was present in Hoenn to witness this event. He watched as Rayquaza transformed, its body shifting and changing as it achieved a form beyond its normal capabilities, a primal state of power that it had never shown before. AZ, in his amazement, spoke words that would be recorded by the Draconids. "It is the Delta, born of the great disturbances in this world. By the bonds born of mankind's wish and the power of the stones, it will calm the troubles that plague the world." This statement is significant because it suggests AZ recognized Mega Evolution for what it was, connecting it to the power of stones, possibly realizing that his ultimate weapon had inadvertently created the Mega Stones that made such transformations possible. Rayquaza, in its Mega Evolved form, possessed power that far exceeded what it had shown in previous encounters. The battle was swift and decisive. Rayquaza stripped Groudon and Kyogre of their primal forms, the enhanced states they had achieved through absorbing the meteor's natural energy, and forced them back into dormancy once more. The Draconids, witnessing this incredible display of power, constructed the Sky Pillar as a tribute to Rayquaza, a tower reaching high into the heavens where the dragon could rest when it was not protecting the planet from space debris. The Draconids also received or interpreted a prophecy at this time. They foresaw that 1,000 years in the future, another meteor would threaten Hoenn, and when that day came, the Draconids promised to pass down the knowledge of how to summon Rayquaza so that someone would be prepared to face the threat. This prophecy would prove accurate, though in ways the ancient Draconids could never have anticipated. The Diamond and Pearl Clan's migration. Several hundred years before the events of Pokemon Legends Arceus, two clans made a significant migration that would shape the future of Hisui. The Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan arrived in Hisui from unknown origins, though they claimed to be descendants of or successors to the Celestica people. This claim was somewhat dubious, as these clans did not originate from Sinnoh as the true Celestica had. Regardless of the authenticity of their heritage, the Diamond and Pearl clans adopted the Celestica name and traditions, positioning themselves as the inheritors of ancient knowledge. The two clans shared a common belief in the importance of the deity they called the almighty Sinnoh, but they fundamentally disagreed about which legendary Pokemon deserved this title. The Diamond Clan worshipped Dialga, believing that time was the supreme force in the universe, and that all things flowed from Dialga's control over temporal progression. The Pearl Clan revered Paldea, arguing that space was paramount, and that without the dimensions Paldea controlled, time would have nowhere to exist. This religious schism created a generational feud between the clans that would persist for hundreds of years, neither side willing to acknowledge that both Dialga and Paldea were merely aspects of the true almighty Sinnoh, which was Arceus itself. The clans established themselves in different areas of Hisui, maintaining an uneasy coexistence that occasionally flared into open conflict, but more often manifested as cold rivalry and theological debate. Both clans maintained relationships with the noble Pokemon, the descendants of the ancient heroes' partners, whom they revered and protected. The Diamond Clan settled in the highlands and areas where Dialga's influence was said to be stronger, while the Pearl Clan made their homes near water and in regions where space seemed more fluid and malleable. Construction and culture. 700 to 150 years before the present. Around 805 years before the modern era, in what is now the Paldea region, two prestigious academies were established, Naranja Academy and Aoeah Academy. These sister institutions, located in Mesagoza, represented a significant advance in formalized Pokemon education and training. They would endure for centuries, becoming some of the oldest continuous educational institutions in the Pokemon world, shaping generations of trainers and researchers. 700 years before the modern era, significant construction began in the Johto region that would create enduring landmarks of spiritual and architectural significance. In Ecruteak City, two massive towers were constructed, the Brass Tower and the Bell Tower. These were not merely buildings, but monuments to legendary Pokemon. The Brass Tower was built as a resting place to Lugia, the guardian of the seas, while the Bell Tower was designed to house Ho-Oh, the rainbow Pokemon. These towers represented the pinnacle of architecture at the time, massive wooden structures that seemed to touch the sky, serving as beacons of hope and symbols of the connection between humans and legendary Pokemon. 500 years later, around 200 years before the modern era, tragedy struck the Brass Tower. A devastating fire broke out, consuming the ancient structure in a blaze so intense that it burned for days. The cause of this fire remains disputed by historians. Some accounts suggest it was started by a lightning strike during a storm. Others claim it was set deliberately, either as an act of war or through carelessness. Regardless of the cause, the result was catastrophic. The brass tower was completely destroyed, reduced to a burned-out shell that would be known forever after as the Burn Tower. 3 Pokemon died in that fire, trapped within the tower as it collapsed, but their story did not end with their deaths. Ho-Oh, the legendary Pokemon of resurrection and rainbows, was drawn to the site of the tragedy. Moved by grief and perhaps seeing potential in these 3 Pokemon, Ho-Oh used its power to resurrect them. But they did not return as they had been. The fire had transformed them, and Ho-Oh's resurrection sealed these changes into their very being. They emerged as 3 new legendary Pokemon: Raikou, embodying the lightning that may have started the fire; Entei, born from the flames that consumed the tower; and Suicune, representing the waters used in vain attempts to extinguish the blaze. These 3 legendary beasts, as they came to be known, fled from the ruins and scattered across Johto, becoming wandering legends themselves. Around this same time period, in the Sinnoh region, then still called Hisui by the clans that lived there, the Sinnoh ruins were constructed. These mysterious structures served as a cultural link between Hisui and Johto, incorporating elements of both regions' architectural styles and religious symbolism. The ruins suggested ongoing contact between these distant regions, implying trade routes and cultural exchange that have been largely forgotten by modern times. Also around this time, approximately 400 years before the modern era, a significant technological advancement occurred: the invention of Pokeballs. The earliest Pokeballs were handcrafted items made from special fruits called apricorns that grew in Johto and other regions. These apricorns could be hollowed out, treated with special techniques, and transformed into devices capable of capturing and storing Pokemon. Different colored apricorns produced Pokeballs with different properties, making each one somewhat unique. This invention revolutionized human-Pokemon relations, allowing for more formalized training and closer partnerships between humans and Pokemon. Around 300 years before the modern era, in Aoeah town in the Johto region, a severe drought struck. The town's water supply dried up, crops withered, and the people faced potential disaster. In their desperation, they turned to the Slowpoke that lived in a nearby well. According to legend, the Slowpoke yawned, and this simple action somehow ended the drought. Whether this was through some mystical property of Slowpoke, sheer coincidence, or a natural weather pattern that just happened to align with the yawn remains unknown. Regardless, the grateful townspeople constructed the Slowpoke well as a monument and declared Slowpoke to be sacred creatures. A law was passed forbidding anyone from harming or capturing the Slowpoke in the well, a tradition that would persist for centuries. In Sinnoh, approximately 400 years before modern times, a dark and dangerous Pokemon was successfully captured and sealed. Spiritomb, a ghost Pokemon made up of 108 malevolent spirits bound together, was imprisoned within an object called the Odd Keystone. The process of sealing Spiritomb required significant spiritual power and the cooperation of many people. Once trapped, the Odd Keystone was hidden in a remote location to prevent Spiritomb from ever being released. The exact reasons for Spiritomb's imprisonment, whether it had committed specific crimes or was simply too dangerous to be left free, had been lost to time. Around the same time in Johto, the pharmacy in Cianwood City was established. This pharmacy would become famous across the region for producing powerful medicines and remedies, including the secret potion capable of curing ailments that afflicted even legendary Pokemon. The pharmacy's founding represented growing sophistication in understanding Pokemon medicine and biology. 150 years before the modern era, another significant event occurred in Johto, this time in Olivine City's lighthouse. The guardian of the lighthouse, a title passed down through a family line, was tasked with maintaining the great light that guided ships safely to port. The current guardian had a Pokemon partner, an Ampharos whose electric power helped keep the lighthouse functioning. However, this Ampharos became ill with a mysterious disease that no ordinary medicine could cure. The guardian, desperate to save their partner, reached out across the region seeking help. Eventually, the secret potion from Cianwood City's pharmacy was used to cure the Ampharos. This event established a tradition of cooperation between Olivine and Cianwood, and the lighthouse guardian position became even more revered. Legends Arceus. 300 years before the modern era, we know from the main Pokemon games, an event of cosmic significance occurred that would forever change the Hisui region. A young trainer from the distant future, a person who knew Pokemon as household companions and who lived in an age of advanced Pokeballs technology and established leagues, suddenly found themselves ripped from their time. Arceus, the creator Pokemon itself, had reached forward through time and pulled this trainer back 300 years for reasons that would not become clear for some time. The trainer appeared in ancient Hisui, disoriented and confused, with only vague instructions from Arceus to seek out all Pokemon. They were found on Prelude Beach by Professor Leventon, a researcher from Galar who had traveled to Hisui to study Pokemon in their natural, untamed state. Laventon recognized that this person, despite their confusion, had an unusual affinity for Pokemon and invited them to join the Galaxy Expedition Team, often called Galaxy Team for short, an organization dedicated to studying and cataloging the Pokemon of Hisui. The Hisui region at this time was vastly different from the Sinnoh that players would later know. There were no cities, only the small settlement of Jubilife Village where the Galaxy Team made their base. Pokemon were viewed with fear and suspicion by many humans, treated as dangerous wild animals rather than partners. The Pokédex did not exist. Pokeballs were still created by hand with apricons. The very concept of becoming a Pokemon trainer was foreign to most people. But something else was happening in Hisui, something that terrified everyone and drove the Galaxy Team's urgency. A massive rift had opened in the sky above Mount Coronet, a tear in reality itself that pulsed with otherworldly energy. This space-time rift was causing Pokemon throughout the region to become frenzied, entering a berserk state where they would attack anything that came near them with unusual aggression. Several of the noble Pokemon, the special descendants of the ancient hero's partners who were revered by the clans, had fallen into this frenzied state and were causing havoc across Hisui. The leaders of the Galaxy Expedition Team, Commander Kamado, tasked the time-displaced trainer with a critical mission: quell the frenzied noble Pokemon. Using a blessing given to them by the clans and special balms crafted from materials that the noble Pokemon favored, the trainer began a journey across Hisui to calm these raging creatures. Each noble Pokemon presented a unique challenge, requiring the trainer to study their patterns, dodge their attacks, and wear them down with bombs until they could be approached and calmed. Meanwhile, Professor Laventon, along with his assistant Ray, or Akari, depending on the player character's choice, asked the trainer to document all the Pokemon species in Hisui, creating what would become the first Pokédex. This dual mission to quell nobles and catalog Pokemon drove the trainer deeper into the wilds of Hisui, into areas no member of the Galaxy Team had ever explored. During their journey, the trainer made several important acquaintances. Adaman, the young leader of the Diamond Clan, was passionate and impulsive, driven by his belief in Dialga and the importance of time. Irida, the leader of the Pearl Clan, was more cautious and thoughtful, devoted to Palkia and the significance of space. Despite their theological differences, both clan leaders recognized the trainer's skill and assisted them in quelling the noble Pokemon that their clans protected. The trainer also encountered a traveling merchant named Volo. Volo was a member of the Ginkgo Guild, traders who moved between settlements selling goods and supplies. Volo presented himself as a friendly, helpful individual with a keen interest in history and mythology. He often appeared when the trainer needed assistance, offering items, sharing information about the region's legends, and expressing fascination with the mysterious plates of Arceus that the trainer occasionally discovered in ruins and dangerous areas. As the trainer successfully quelled each noble Pokemon, the situation should have improved, but instead the rift in the sky grew larger. The space-time distortions, small tears in reality that appeared randomly across Hisui and spawned Pokemon from other times and places, became more frequent and dangerous. Commander Kamado, growing increasingly desperate and paranoid, began to suspect that the trainer themselves might be the cause of these problems. After all, the trainer had appeared out of nowhere around the same time the rift appeared, and they possessed knowledge and skills that no one in Hisui could explain. The situation reached a breaking point after the final noble Pokemon was quelled. The rift had grown to enormous size, and Commander Kamado, convinced that the trainer was somehow responsible, banished them from Jubilife Village. The trainer was branded an outsider, potentially dangerous, and cast out into the wilderness. With nowhere else to turn, the trainer sought refuge with Volo, who directed them to a woman named Kogita. Kogita lived in a remote location, far from any settlement. She was ancient beyond measure, though she appeared middle-aged, and possessed knowledge that seemed to span centuries. She recognized the trainer's predicament and revealed crucial information. Both she and Volo were descendants of the Celestica people, the original inhabitants of Hisui who had worshipped Arceus and the Creation Trio. Kogita explained that the rift was caused by an imbalance in the fabric of space-time itself, and that Dialga and Palkia, summoned somehow, were fighting at the peak of Mount Coronet, their battle threatening to tear reality apart. The trainer, with help from Adaman, Irida, and eventually members of the Galaxy Team who realized Kamado's accusations were wrong, made the difficult climb to the summit of Mount Coronet. There they found the Temple of Sinnoh, the ancient structure built by the Celestica, and within the temple they witnessed a terrifying sight. Dialga and Palkia, two of the fundamental forces of the universe, were locked in combat, their battle distorting space-time so severely that reality itself was breaking down. But the rift at Mount Coronet was a different matter entirely. The trainer had to calm these enraged deities, fighting against impossible odds to quell first one, and then the other of these legendary Pokemon. The battle was fierce, pushing the trainer and their Pokemon to their absolute limits. But through skill, determination, and the bonds they had formed with their Pokemon partners, the trainer succeeded. Dialga and Palkia were calmed, the crisis was over, or so it seemed. Commander Kamado, humbled by his mistake and grateful for the trainer's heroic actions, welcomed them back to Jubilee Village with honors. The Galaxy team celebrated their success, and it appeared that peace had returned to Hisui. But the story was far from over. The trainer, following up on leads and completing research tasks, eventually gathered all of the plates of Arceus scattered throughout Hisui. With all 18 plates in hand, they traveled to the Temple of Sinnoh, intending to perhaps commune with Arceus or understand the deity's purpose in bringing them to this time. But as they approached the temple, they found Volo waiting for them. Volo's friendly demeanor had vanished, replaced by an expression of cold determination and barely contained madness. He revealed his true intentions. Volo was not merely a descendant of the Celestica. He was obsessed with their teachings and had spent his entire life studying the mythology of Arceus and the creation of the world. He had concluded that the current world was flawed, filled with suffering and injustice, and his goal was nothing less than to meet Arceus, take its power for himself, and recreate the world according to his own vision of perfection. Everything Volo had done, every helpful gesture and friendly conversation, had been manipulation. He had been guiding the trainer, using them to gather the plates of Arceus and cause enough chaos in Hisui to weaken the barrier between the mortal world and Arceus' realm. The space-time rift had been his doing, created through forbidden rituals and the summoning of Giratina, the renegade Pokemon banished to the Distortion World. Volo had made a pact with Giratina, promising to overthrow Arceus and reshape reality if the Shadow Dragon would lend him its power. Volo challenged the trainer to battle, and what followed was one of the most brutal encounters in Pokemon history. First, the trainer faced Volo's team, 6 powerful Pokemon that he had raised and trained to their absolute peak. Volo was a master trainer, skilled beyond anyone the time-displaced hero had faced before. His strategy was flawless, his Pokemon perfectly in sync with his commands. The battle pushed the trainer to their limits, but they emerged victorious. But Volo was not finished. He summoned Giratina, calling forth the renegade Pokemon from the Distortion World. The Shadow Dragon emerged and the trainer was forced into an immediate second battle, this time against a legendary Pokemon. Giratina fought with terrible fury, its mastery over antimatter making it one of the most dangerous opponents imaginable. But the trainer's Pokemon rose to the challenge, and through incredible effort, they defeated Giratina. And still, Volo was not done. Giratina transformed, shifting into its origin form, its true shape from the Distortion World where the normal rules of physics did not apply. The trainer had to fight Giratina again, this time against an even more powerful version of the renegade Pokemon. The battle was desperate, with both sides exhausted and pushed beyond what should have been possible. But finally, through sheer determination and the unbreakable bond between the trainer and their Pokemon, Giratina fell. Volo, faced with his failure, was consumed by rage and despair. His plans had failed, his Pokemon had been defeated, and his dream of reshaping the world lay in ruins. But rather than accept defeat gracefully, Volo swore that he would not give up, that he would continue searching for a way to meet Arceus and achieve his goals no matter how long it took. With those words, he vanished into the wilderness, leaving the trainer alone at the Temple of Sinnoh. The trainer, finally able to complete their original purpose, used the plates to call forth Arceus. The alpha Pokemon appeared before them and in a final test challenged the trainer to battle. This was not a fight born of hostility, but a trial to measure the trainer's worth. The trainer battled against the creator of the universe itself and, miraculously, proved themselves capable. Arceus acknowledged the trainer's strength, their bond with Pokemon, and their purity of heart. Arceus revealed the purpose behind everything that had happened. The time rift, the frenzied nobles, even Volo's betrayal had all been part of Arceus' plan to test the trainer and ensure that humans and Pokemon could truly bond and work together in harmony. The trainer had proved that such bonds were possible, that humans and Pokemon were not separate species but partners who could achieve greatness together. Satisfied with this proof, Arceus returned the trainer to their own time, erasing most memories of Hisui from their mind, but leaving them with the knowledge and growth they had gained from the experience. But what became of Volo? Historical records from after this time are sparse, but hints and clues suggest his story did not end at the Temple of Sinnoh. Volo vanished from Hisui, but he did not die. Whether through some pact with Giratina, exposure to the powers he had been manipulating, or some other unknown factor, Volo found himself cursed or blessed with an impossibly long lifespan. He would live for over 1,000 years, witnessing the slow transformation of Hisui into Sinnoh, watching civilizations rise and fall, and perhaps continuing his obsessive quest to meet Arceus and reshape the world. Evidence suggests that Volo eventually found his way to the Kalos region. Whether this was centuries after the events in Hisui or relatively soon after is unclear, but what is certain is that Volo would play a role in events still to come in our timeline. But for now, in the Hisui of 300 years before the modern era, the region entered a period of peace. The Galaxy Expedition team continued their work, gradually building the foundation of what would become Sinnoh. The Diamond and Pearl clans maintained their rivalry but lived in relative harmony. And the noble Pokémon, no longer frenzied, returned to their roles as guardians and protectors of the land. The final centuries before the modern era. As the centuries progressed, the various regions of the Pokémon world continued to develop and change. In Sinnoh, Jubilife Village slowly grew into a proper town and eventually into a city. The Galaxy Expedition team evolved into civilian governance. The traditions of the Diamond and Pearl clans gradually faded, as new generations had less direct contact with Dialga and Palkia. Though some family lines maintained their devotion to one or the other, the Temple of Sinnoh at the peak of Mount Coronet remained a sacred site, though fewer and fewer people made the pilgrimage to visit it. In Johto, the Bell Tower continued to stand as a monument to Hoenn, though sightings of the rainbow Pokémon became increasingly rare. The three legendary beasts, Raikou Entei and Suicune, roamed the region, occasionally being spotted but never staying in one place for long. These Pokémon seemed to be searching for something, though what they sought remained a mystery. In Hoenn, the Draconids maintained their traditions and their prophecy about the meteor that would come 1,000 years after Rayquaza's last appearance. They trained in the arts of dragon mastery and kept vigil, preparing for the day when they would need to summon Rayquaza once more. Meanwhile, Groudon and Kyogre slept in their hidden sanctuaries, the Cave of Origin and the Seafloor Cavern, their previous battles having left them weakened and dormant. In Kanto, a war occurred at some point in the past, the details of which are extremely scarce. This conflict is mentioned only briefly through references in games, particularly in conversations with Lieutenant Surge, who mentions having fought in a war where electric-type Pokémon saved his life. Whether this war involved other regions, who the combatants were, and what caused it remain mysteries that may never be fully answered. What is clear is that the war left lasting impressions on those who fought in it and may have influenced the formation of certain criminal organizations that would later plague the region. The various regions slowly developed the technology and social structures that would define the modern Pokémon world. Pokeball manufacturing became industrialized to mass-produce devices using advanced materials. The Pokémon League system was established in various regions, creating standardized gyms, Elite Fours, and champion position. Pokemon centers and Pokemarts became common fixtures in every town. The bond between humans and Pokemon, once rare and feared in places like ancient Hisui, became the foundation of society. And throughout all of this, AZ continued his wandering. For 3,000 years, he walked the earth, a giant among men, immortal and cursed. He witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. He saw regions transform and technologies advance. He watched as humans and Pokemon grew closer, forming bonds that would have seemed impossible in his time. But through all of this, Floette never returned to him. The guilt of his actions, the genocide he had committed with the ultimate weapon, and weighed on him constantly. He was a living monument to the cost of grief-driven vengeance, a warning written in immortal flesh about the dangers of going too far in pursuit of what we love. The modern era begins, Red's journey. Our timeline now reaches what scholars call Year Zero of the modern era, the point where Pokemon history transitions from legend and ancient history into documented contemporary events. This is the time of Red's journey through Kanto, the point where the story many trainers know begins. We are approximately 3,000 years after the Kalos War and the Darkest Day, 300 years after the events of Legends Arceus. In Pallet Town, a small settlement in the Kanto region, a young boy named Red turned 10 years old. In this era, 10 was the age when children were considered old enough to begin their Pokemon journey, to receive their first Pokemon, and start traveling the region, training and battling. Red had two significant figures in his life who would shape his journey: his rival Blue, the grandson of Professor Samuel Oak, and Professor Oak himself, the foremost Pokemon researcher in Kanto. On the day Red and Blue were set to receive their first Pokemon, an unusual situation occurred. Red had overslept, arriving late to Professor Oak's laboratory. By the time he arrived, Blue had already selected his starter Pokemon. Professor Oak had 3 Pokemon prepared: Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, each representing one of the 3 classic starter types. Depending on which version of events one follows, Red received one of these three as his partner, while Blue took the one that would have a type advantage over Red's choice, ensuring that the two rivals would always have an interesting dynamic in their battles. However, in one particular timeline, something different happened. A wild Pikachu had found its way into Professor Oak's lab and formed an instant bond with Red. Recognizing this connection, Professor Oak allowed Red to take Pikachu as his starter instead of the traditional three. This Pikachu, while initially independent and sometimes disobedient, would become Red's most iconic partner and closest friend. Red's journey through Kanto followed the classic trainer's path. He challenged 8 gyms, each representing a different Pokemon type, to earn badges that would qualify him for the Pokemon League. Along the way, he encountered and thwarted the plans of Team Rocket, a criminal organization led by Giovanni, who served as both the leader of Team Rocket and secretly, the 8th gym leader. Team Rocket's goals centered around exploiting Pokemon for profit, stealing rare or powerful Pokemon, and using Pokemon as tools for criminal enterprises rather than partners. Red's encounters with Team Rocket led him to several significant locations, and revealed several dark secrets about Pokemon experimentation. In Lavender Town, Red discovered that Team Rocket had killed a Marowak, leaving its orphaned Cubone to mourn alone in the Pokemon Tower. This act of cruelty drove home to Red the evil that Team Rocket represented. In the Sylph Company building in Saffron City, Red fought through Team Rocket members who had taken over the corporation, intending to steal the Master Ball prototype, a Pokeball said to capture any Pokemon without fail. On Cinnabar Island, Red discovered the remains of Pokemon experimentation that had occurred at the Pokemon Mansion. Records indicated that a scientific team had traveled to South America and discovered Mew, the ancestor of all Pokemon, in a jungle. They had obtained DNA samples and attempted to clone Mew, hoping to create a Pokemon with Mew's genetic flexibility that enhanced power. The experiment succeeded in creating a living creature, but that creature proved to be far more powerful and far more intelligent than anyone had anticipated. Mewtwo escaped from the mansion, destroying much of it in the process and presumably killing the scientists involved. Mewtwo's current whereabouts were unknown, though rumors suggested it had taken refuge in the Cerulean Cave, the most dangerous and deepest cave system in Kanto. Red eventually defeated all 8 gym leaders, including Giovanni, whose defeat caused him to disband Team Rocket, at least temporarily, and disappear. With his 8 badges, Red qualified for this Pokemon League at the Indigo Plateau. He battled his way through the Elite Four of the strongest trainers in Kanto, each specializing in a particular type. After defeating the Elite Four, Red faced the champion, a position that, depending on the timeline, was held either by Lance, a master of Dragon-type Pokemon, or by Blue, who had arrived at the League just ahead of Red and defeated Lance to become champion. Regardless of who held the title, Red emerged victorious, becoming the new champion of Kanto. But Red's journey had one final chapter. After becoming champion, Red ventured into Cerulean Cave, the mysterious and dangerous cavern where legend said the most powerful Pokemon in Kanto dwelt. Deep within the cave, Red encountered Mewtwo, the clone of Mew, a Pokemon of such immense psychic power that it could kill with a thought. The battle between Red and Mewtwo was legendary, pushing both trainer and Pokemon to their absolute limits. But Red succeeded in defeating Mewtwo and capturing it, adding the most powerful Pokemon in Kanto to his team. Red's journey through Kanto took place during a period of relative technological simplicity compared to later eras. Cell phones did not exist. Trainers communicated through Pokemon centers or didn't communicate at all during their travels. The Pokédex was a relatively new invention, with Red serving as one of Professor Oak's test users, helping to catalog and document Pokemon throughout Kanto. The world was smaller, the dangers more immediate, and the bond between trainer and Pokemon was tested constantly through the challenges of the journey. Simultaneous events in Hoenn, the 3rd generation. At the same time Red was journeying through Kanto, on the other side of the Pokemon world, events were unfolding in the Hoenn region that would prove equally significant. A young trainer, either May or Brendan depending on the timeline, had recently moved to Hoenn when their parent, Norman, was appointed as the gym leader of Petalburg City. This trainer was given their first Pokemon by Professor Birch, who had been attacked by a wild Pokemon and needed rescue. The starter the trainer used to save Professor Birch became their partner. The trainer's journey through Hoenn was complicated by the presence of 2 opposing criminal organizations, Team Aqua and Team Magma. 2 simple criminal enterprises like Team Rocket, but rather extremist groups driven by environmental ideology taken to dangerous extremes. Team Aqua, led by a man named Archie, believed that the ocean was the source of all life and that expanding the sea would create a paradise for water-type Pokemon and aquatic life. Team Magma, led by Maxie, believed that land was paramount and that expanding the continents would create more habitats for humans and land-dwelling Pokemon. Both teams sought the same tools to achieve their opposing goals: Groudon and Kyogre, the super ancient Pokemon that had shaped Hoenn's geography through their ancient battles. Team Magma sought to awaken Groudon to expand the land, while Team Aqua aimed to awaken Kyogre to expand the seas. Neither team understood the true nature or power of these creatures, nor did they realize that awakening either one would inevitably awaken the other, restarting their eternal rivalry. The trainer traveled through Hoenn, earning badges from the 8 gyms and repeatedly encountering both Team Aqua and Team Magma as they raced to find the orbs that could control Groudon and Kyogre. The conflict escalated when both teams succeeded in their goals. In the Cave of Origin, beneath Sootopolis City, Team Magma awakened Groudon, while Team Aqua simultaneously awakened Kyogre in the seafloor cavern. The two titans emerged and immediately resumed their ancient battle. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Groudon's presence caused volcanic eruptions and severe drought, with the sun blazing hotter and hotter, threatening to burn Hoenn to ash. Kyogre's awakening brought endless rain and flooding, with tidal waves and tsunamis threatening to drown the region. The weather itself became a weapon as these two titans clashed, and it quickly became clear that if they were not stopped, Hoenn would be completely destroyed. Archie and Maxie, witnessing the devastation their actions had caused, finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. These were not Pokemon that could be controlled or reasoned with. They were forces of nature, and they would continue fighting until one destroyed the other, or until the entire region was rendered uninhabitable. In their horror and desperation, the leaders of Team Aqua and Team Magma worked with the trainer to find a solution. The answer came from the Draconids and the ancient prophecy they had maintained for 1,000 years. Rayquaza, the sky dragon that had ended previous battles between Groudon and Kyogre, could be summoned. Wallace, the Sootopolis City gym leader and later champion of Hoenn, along with his mentor Stephen Stone, guided the trainer to the Sky Pillar. There, using the ancient summoning rituals preserved by the Draconids, they called Rayquaza from its rest in the upper atmosphere. Rayquaza descended, and its power was absolute. The Sky Dragon struck down both Groudon and Kyogre, forcing them to revert to their normal forms and retreat once again to their sleeping places. The weather returned to normal, the disaster ceased, and Hoenn was saved. Team Aqua and Team Magma disbanded, their leaders humbled by the near-apocalypse they had caused and recognizing the folly of their extremist ideologies. But this version of events was just one possibility. In an alternate timeline, events played out differently. In this version, the meteorites that fell on Hoenn carried even more natural energy, enough for Groudon and Kyogre to achieve forms beyond their normal states. When awakened, they underwent primal reversion, transforming into Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre, accessing their ancient power from the time of the world's formation. In these primal forms, they were even more dangerous, their battle threatening to literally tear Hoenn apart. When Rayquaza was summoned in this timeline, the natural energy from the meteorites allowed it to achieve Mega Evolution, just as it had done 1,000 years ago when AZ witnessed it. The battle between Mega Rayquaza and the two primal Pokemon was fierce, shaking the entire region, but Rayquaza's Mega Evolved form possessed enough power to defeat both ancient titans and force them back into dormancy. In either version of events, the trainer went on to challenge the Pokemon League, defeat the Elite Four, and face the champion. They succeeded, becoming the new champion of Hoenn, and in doing so established themselves as one of the greatest trainers of their generation. 3 years later, the Johto journeys. 3 years passed after Red's journey through Kanto. The world had changed in subtle ways. Technology had advanced slightly, with some trainers now having access to basic communication devices. The understanding of Pokemon breeding had improved, with daycare facilities offering services to raise and breed Pokemon. And Red himself had changed, becoming something of a legend in Kanto, before vanishing mysteriously, last seen heading toward Mount Silver, the tallest and most dangerous mountain in the region, which stood on the border between Kanto and Johto. In New Bark Town in the Johto region, a young trainer, rival often called Ethan in later versions, or the female trainer Chris or Lyra, depending on the timeline, received their first Pokemon from Professor Elm. This new generation of trainer was tasked with running an errand to deliver a Pokemon egg to Mr. Pokemon, a collector of rare items and Pokemon. On their way to complete this simple task, the trainer encountered something concerning, a strange red-haired boy peering through the window of Professor Elm's lab. When the trainer returned to New Barktown after their errand, they discovered that Professor Elm's lab had been broken into and a Pokemon stolen. The red-haired boy they had seen, who called himself Silver, was the thief. But there was something different about Silver compared to Blue or other rivals from Kanto. Silver was hostile, dismissive, and treated Pokemon not as partners but as tools to be used and discarded if they were not strong enough. He represented a darker philosophy of training, one focused purely on power without respect or bond. The trainer's journey through Johto revealed a region rich in history and tradition. Johto had a strong connection to legendary Pokemon, with numerous myths and sightings. The three legendary beasts, Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, roamed the region, and the trainer would encounter them at various points, though capturing them proved incredibly difficult as they fled from battle and traveled constantly. At the Bell Tower in Akrutik City, if the trainer proved themselves worthy, they might even encounter Ho-Oh itself, the rainbow Pokemon that had resurrected the three beasts a century ago. But Johto's most pressing problem was Team Rocket. The organization that Red had supposedly disbanded 3 years earlier had reformed, this time without Giovanni. The new leaders, a group of executives including Archer, Ariana, Proton, and Petrel, sought to contact Giovanni and convince him to return. They believed that if they could prove Team Rocket was still powerful and effective, their old boss would come back and lead them to even greater heights of criminal success. Team Rocket's most ambitious plan involved Mahogany Town and the Lake of Rage. They had set up a secret base beneath the Mahogany Town gym, using experimental technology to broadcast a radio signal that affected Pokemon. This signal caused Pokemon to evolve prematurely or behave aggressively. The trainer, with help from Lance of the Elite Four, uncovered and shut down this operation, striking a major blow against Team Rocket. But the organization was not finished. Team Rocket made one final, desperate play to summon Giovanni back. They took over the Goldenrod radio tower, broadcasting a signal designed to reach wherever Giovanni was hiding and call him back to lead them. The trainer, proving once again that Team Rocket's plans would not go unchallenged, stormed the radio tower, fought through the executives, and shut down the broadcast. Faced with complete failure, and the realization that Giovanni was not coming back, Team Rocket finally truly disbanded, its members scattering and giving up their criminal ways. The trainer continued their journey, earning badges from Johto's 8 gyms, but their adventure was far from over. After defeating the Johto Pokemon League and becoming champion, the trainer discovered that they could now travel to Kanto, the neighboring region that had been Red's stomping grounds 3 years earlier. In Kanto, the trainer could challenge the 8 Kanto gyms, including Giovanni's former gym in Viridian City, now led by Blue. But the ultimate challenge awaited at Mount Silver. At the peak of this treacherous mountain, standing alone in the snow, was Red. The legendary trainer from 3 years ago had been here all this time, training in isolation with his Pokemon. The battle between the Johto trainer and Red was considered by many to be the ultimate Pokemon battle, a clash between the champion of Johto and the living legend of Kanto. The Johto trainer emerged victorious, proving themselves the strongest trainer of their era. Silver, the rival who had started as a Pokemon thief and cruel trainer, underwent a significant character arc during this time. Through his repeated losses to the protagonist, and through witnessing the strength that came from bonds with Pokemon, rather than simply forcing them to be strong, Silver slowly changed. By the end of his journey, he had learned to respect his Pokemon, to see them as partners rather than tools, and to understand that true strength came from the bond between trainer and Pokemon. This transformation represented hope that even those who start on the wrong path can change and grow. Contemporary with Johto, the Sinnoh adventures. Around the same time as the events in Johto, or perhaps shortly after, a new generation of trainers began their journeys in the Sinnoh region. This region, once known as Hisui, had transformed dramatically over the 300 years since the events of Legends Arceus. Jubilife Village had become Jubilife City, a bustling metropolitan center. The Temple of Sinnoh was now called the Spear Pillar, and Mount Coronet had become a central landmark, dividing the region into eastern and western sections. 2 young trainers, Lucas and Dawn, one serving as the protagonist and the other as the assistant to Professor Rowan, depending on the version, received their first Pokemon under unusual circumstances. They were attacked by Wild Starly near Lake Verity and defended themselves using Pokemon from a briefcase that Professor Rowan had carelessly left behind. These Pokemon were the traditional Sinnoh starters, Turtwig, Chimchar, and Piplup. Impressed by the trainer's quick thinking and natural skill, Professor Rowan allowed them to keep the Pokemon and begin their official journey. The trainer's rival was Barry, an energetic and impulsive boy who was constantly in a hurry and would fine people for making him wait. Despite his eccentricities, Barry was a skilled trainer and pushed the protagonist to constantly improve. The 3 traveled through Sinnoh together, sometimes as rivals and sometimes as allies, forming a bond that exemplified the spirit of Pokemon training. But Sinnoh faced a threat unlike any other region. Team Galactic, led by a man named Cyrus. Unlike Team Rocket's simple greed or Team's Aqua, and Magma's misguided environmentalism, Team Galactic's goals were apocalyptic in scope. Cyrus believed that human emotion was the source of all conflict and suffering. He sought to destroy the current universe entirely and create a new one, a world without spirit, emotion, or strife, where he would reign as a god over emotionless beings. To accomplish this mad goal, he needed the power of Dialga and Palkia, the Pokemon of time and space. Team Galactic's plan unfolded in stages. First, they created Red Chains, artifacts that could control legendary Pokemon using the essence of the Lake Guardians, Uxie, Misparade, and Azelf. They captured these Pokemon from their respective lakes, draining their power to forge the chains. The protagonist and their allies worked desperately to stop Team Galactic, but they were too late to prevent the organization from reaching the Spear Pillar atop Mount Coronet. At the Spear Pillar, Cyrus used the Red Chains to summon both Dialga and Palkia, intending to force them to create a new universe. The sky tore open as the fabric of reality began to break down. Time and space became unstable, and the entire world was at risk of being unmade. But the Lake Guardians, freed by the protagonist, intervened. They broke the Red Chains, and the protagonist was able to engage either Dialga or Palkia in battle, depending on the version, calming the enraged deity and preventing the destruction of the universe. In a variant timeline, both Dialga and Palkia were summoned, and the distortion of reality was so severe that Giratina, the renegade Pokemon from the Distortion World, was disturbed. Giratina emerged and dragged Cyrus into the Distortion World, taking him to a realm where the normal laws of physics did not apply. The protagonist followed into the Shadow Realm and battled Giratina, calming it and preventing further damage to space-time. Cyrus was left trapped in the Distortion World or managed to escape, depending on the account, but Team Galactic was disbanded and their apocalyptic plan thwarted. The protagonist went on to challenge the Sinnoh Pokemon League, facing off against Elite Four members who specialized in Psychic, Ground, Fire, and Bug types, before battling Cynthia, the champion of Sinnoh. Cynthia was renowned as one of the strongest champions in history, a master strategist with a team that had no obvious weaknesses. Her Garchomp in particular was legendary for its power and speed. The protagonist's victory over Cynthia marked them as one of the elite trainers of their generation. Cynthia had a personal connection to the mythology of Sinnoh. She was a researcher of ancient history and myths, particularly interested in the Creation Trio and Arceus. Her studies had led her to uncover many secrets about Sinnoh's past, and she bore a striking resemblance to Volo, the ancient merchant from Hisui. Whether this resemblance indicated a family connection, reincarnation, or a simple coincidence remained a mystery, but it suggested that Volo's descendants, if he had any, might have continued his interest in legendary Pokemon and the creation mythology. The Unova legend, A New Generation. Several years after the events in Sinnoh, a new trainer named Hilbert or Hilda began their journey in the Unova region. Unova was geographically distant from the previous regions, located across an ocean and inspired by North America rather than Japan. This region had its own unique history and legendary Pokemon, centered around the Tau Trio, Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem. The trainer's journey was complicated by the presence of Team Plasma, an organization that, at first glance, appeared to be advocating for Pokemon rights. Team Plasma publicly called for the liberation of all Pokemon, arguing that keeping Pokemon in balls and forcing them to battle was a form of slavery. Many people in Unova were swayed by these arguments, questioning whether their relationships with their Pokemon partners were ethical. The leader of Team Plasma was a young man named N, short for Natural Harmonia Gropius. He could understand Pokemon language and communicate with them directly. He had been raised in isolation, shown only Pokemon that had been abused or mistreated by humans, and as a result, he genuinely believed that Pokemon and humans should be separated for the Pokemon's own good. N was kind, idealistic, and completely sincere in his beliefs. But N was being manipulated. The true leader of Team Plasma was Ghetsis, a cruel and power-hungry man who claimed to be N's adoptive father. Ghetsis had raised N from childhood, shaping his worldview and molding him into a tool. Team Plasma's public mission of Pokemon liberation was a lie. Ghetsis' real goal was to convince everyone else to release their Pokemon while Team Plasma retained theirs, creating a situation where Team Plasma would have a monopoly on Pokemon power and could conquer Unova unopposed. The protagonist's repeated encounters with N throughout their journey revealed complexity of the situation. N challenged the protagonist to prove that Pokemon and humans could have genuine bonds, not relationships based on control or exploitation. Through these battles and conversations, seeds of doubt began to grow in N's mind about the absolute nature of his beliefs. The climax of events in Unova came at N's castle, a massive fortress that Team Plasma had built around the Pokemon League building, trapping the Elite Four inside. N had successfully awakened one of the legendary dragons of Unova, either Reshiram or Zekrom, depending on the version. Using the power of this legendary Pokemon, N declared himself the hero of ideals if he had Zekrom, or the hero of truth if he had Reshiram, and he challenged the protagonist to prove their beliefs in battle. But the protagonist was not defenseless. They had obtained the Light Stone or Dark Stone, the dormant form of the legendary dragon that N had not awakened. Through their journey and the strength of their bonds with Pokemon, the protagonist awakened the second legendary dragon. The battle between the two heroes, each backed by a legendary dragon representing fundamental forces of truth and ideals, shook N's castle and tested both trainers to their limits. The protagonist emerged victorious, defeating both N and his legendary dragon. This defeat shattered N's worldview, proving to him that genuine bonds between humans and Pokemon were not only possible, but could be stronger than the relationship between Pokemon and someone who simply wanted to free them. N's eyes were open to the reality that he had been manipulated his entire life. Ghetsis, seeing his carefully laid plans crumbling and his tool refusing to obey, revealed his true nature. The protagonist defeated Ghetsis in battle, and the villain was arrested, his conspiracy exposed. Team Plasma was disbanded, though some true believers continued to operate underground. N, freed from Ghetsis' manipulation and with his worldview fundamentally changed, decided to leave Unova. He released most of his Pokemon, keeping only his legendary dragon, and set off to travel the world to see how humans and Pokemon interacted in other regions, and to discover his own truth and ideals. The protagonist, having saved Unova from Team Plasma's plot, went on to challenge the Pokemon League officially, as their previous attempt had been interrupted by N's castle, and became the champion. 2 years later, the return to Unova. 2 years after these events, Unova faced a new crisis. Team Plasma had reformed, but now it was split into two factions. One group wearing black uniforms continued Ghetsis' original mission of conquest under new leadership. The other group, wearing white uniforms, consisted of former members who genuinely believed in N's ideals of Pokemon liberation and wanted to make amends for the harm the original Team Plasma had caused. A new protagonist named Nate or Rosa began their journey from a different part of Unova. This region had developed significantly in 2 years, with new cities and routes opened up, and the legendary Pokemon Kyurem, the remains of the original dragon that had split into Reshiram and Zekrom, had been discovered. Ghetsis, who had somehow escaped from custody or been released, emerged as the leader of the black uniformed Team Plasma. His goals remained the same, but now he had a new tool, Kyurem. Using an artifact called the DNA Splicers, Ghetsis discovered that Kyurem could fuse with either Reshiram or Zekrom, temporarily recombining parts of the original dragon and creating Black Kyurem or White Kyurem, forms even more powerful than the legendary dragons alone. The protagonist of this new adventure worked with the reformed Team Plasma members and eventually encountered N, who had returned to Unova upon hearing about the crisis. The final confrontation occurred at the Giant Chasm, where Ghetsis had been using Kyurem to freeze the region. The protagonist and N worked together to stop Ghetsis, defeating him definitively and separating Kyurem from whichever legendary dragon it had been fused with. Ghetsis, completely broken by his second defeat and the realization that his plans would never succeed, was taken into custody, his mind shattered by failure. Team Plasma was finally permanently disbanded, with the black uniform members surrendering and the white uniform members going public with their mission to help Pokemon. The Kalos Adventure and the return of AZ. Several years into the future from the first Pokemon games, in the Kalos region, a new generation of trainers began their journey. The protagonist, either named Callum or Serena, depending on the version, received their first Pokemon in Vanillville Town and set out with a group of friends: Shauna, Tierno, Trevor, and their rival, the ambitious Serena or Callum. Kalos was a region of beauty and sophistication, known for its fashion, art, and culinary excellence. But it was also the region where 3,000 years ago, AZ had fired the ultimate weapon and ended the Kalos War. The echoes of that ancient tragedy still resonate in Kalos, though few modern inhabitants knew the full story. The protagonist's journey brought them into contact with Professor Sycamore, the regional Pokemon professor who had a particular interest in the phenomenon of Mega Evolution. Mega Evolution was a recently rediscovered process by which certain Pokemon, when holding specific Mega Stones and bonding deeply with their trainer, could temporarily transform into more powerful forms. Professor Sycamore theorized that Mega Stones were created 3,000 years ago by the energy from the ultimate weapon, a theory that aligned with what AZ had witnessed when he saw Mega Rayquaza. In Lumio City, the protagonist met a tall, ancient-looking man in shabby clothes named AZ. This giant figure spoke in riddles and seemed burdened by tremendous sadness. Though the protagonist did not realize it at first, this was the same AZ who had been king 3,000 years ago, still wandering the world, still searching for Floette, still unable to die or escape his guilt. The peace of Kalos was threatened by Team Flare, a criminal organization led by Lysandra, a charismatic businessman and philanthropist who publicly spoke about making the world more beautiful. Lysandra was a descendant of AZ's brother, inheriting both the knowledge of the ultimate weapon and a particular worldview shaped by his family history. Lysandra had become disillusioned with humanity, believing that overpopulation and resource depletion would inevitably lead to conflict and suffering. His solution was horrifyingly simple. Use the ultimate weapon to eliminate most of the world's population, preserving only Team Flare and a select few he deemed worthy, creating a beautiful world for a chosen few. Team Flare's plan was complex and involved capturing one of Kalos' legendary Pokemon. Xerneas is the life Pokemon, or Yveltal, the destruction Pokemon, depending on the version, was needed to power the ultimate weapon. In the end, Lysandra succeeded in activating the weapon, but his plans were thwarted by the protagonist and their friends. The weapon fired, but its power was disrupted and weakened, preventing the mass extinction Lysandra had planned. The weapon then destroyed itself, collapsing the underground headquarters of Team Flare and apparently burying Lysandra in the rubble. In either case, the protagonist and their friends escaped, but Lysandra's fate remained ambiguous. After these events, during a celebration in Lumiosa City to crown the protagonist as the new champion of Kalos, AZ appeared and challenged the protagonist to a battle. This was not a battle driven by malice or a test of strength, but rather a final reckoning for AZ. He wanted to understand what it meant to be a Pokemon trainer in this new era, to see if the bonds between humans and Pokemon had truly become what he had destroyed his soul trying to achieve 3,000 years ago. The protagonist defeated AZ, and in that moment something miraculous occurred. Floette, who had been watching from somewhere hidden for 3,000 years, saw that AZ had finally changed. He was no longer the king consumed by grief and rage who had committed genocide. He was a broken, repentant man who had suffered for millennia for his crimes. Floette descended from the sky and returned to AZ, reuniting with him for the first time in 3,000 years. AZ wept openly, and the curse of his immortality, if not lifted, at least felt lighter. He had been forgiven by the one whose forgiveness mattered most. For the first time in 3,000 years, AZ could imagine a future that held something other than wandering and guilt. The protagonist had not only saved Kalos from Team Flare, but had also unknowingly helped to end the suffering of a man who had been punished longer than most civilizations existed. Alola and the Island Challenge. Several years after the events of Kalos, in the tropical Alola region, a different kind of Pokemon journey began. Alola had no traditional gyms or Pokemon League. Instead, the region practiced the Island Challenge, a series of trials on 4 islands, where trainers faced totem Pokemon and captains before battling powerful Kahuna trainers. A young trainer named Elio, or Celine, had just moved to Alola and was beginning their Island Challenge journey. Alola had its own legendary Pokemon and unique history. 1,000 years ago, the region had been protected by the guardian deities, Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, Tapu Bulu, and Tapu Fini, powerful Pokemon that watched over each of the 4 main islands. These guardians still existed, and occasionally intervened in human affairs when they deemed it necessary. The protagonist's journey was complicated by the appearance of strange creatures called Ultra Beasts, Pokemon from another dimension that had come through wormholes connecting Alola to Ultra Cygni. These Ultra Beasts were dangerous and unpredictable, and an organization called the Ether Foundation claimed to be working to protect Pokemon and deal with the Ultra Beast threat. However, the Ether Foundation's leader, Lusamine, had an obsession with Ultra Beasts that bordered on madness. She had encountered them years ago and become fascinated, seeing them as the ultimate form of beauty and perfection. Her obsession drove her to extreme actions, including freezing Pokemon in her collection like trophies, and neglecting her children, Gladion and Lily, to the point where Gladion ran away and Lily developed a fear of touching Pokemon. The crisis came to a head when Lusamine opened a massive wormhole to Ultra Space, intending to reach the Ultra Beasts and perhaps live among them. The protagonist, along with Lily and other allies, entered Ultra Space to stop her and faced off against Lusamine, who had been affected by exposure to Ultra Beasts and was no longer entirely human in her thinking. The protagonist succeeded in defeating Lusamine and closing the wormhole, and while Lusamine eventually recovered, the experience helped Lily overcome her fears and grow stronger. Galar and the Darkest Day returns. In the Galar region, approximately 3,000 years after the first Darkest Day, a new generation of trainers began their journey. The protagonist, named Victor or Gloria, started in Postwick with their childhood friend Hop, the younger brother of Leon, the undefeated champion of Galar. Galar's culture was heavily focused on Pokemon battles as entertainment, with gym challenges broadcast throughout the region and stadiums packed with cheering fans. The phenomenon of Dynamax, where Pokemon grew to enormous sizes in specific power spots, was unique to Galar and had become the centerpiece of their battle culture. Trainers could activate this transformation using a Dynamax band during official matches, creating spectacular battles between gigantic Pokemon. The protagonist journeyed through Galar, earning badges and gradually uncovering mysteries about the region's history. Sonia, the assistant to Professor Magnolia, and a researcher in her own right, was investigating the darkest day that had occurred 3,000 years ago. She discovered that the true heroes who stopped that catastrophe were not humans, but the legendary Pokemon Zacian and Zamazenta, and that the historical records had been altered over time to promote a narrative of human heroism. The antagonist of Galar's story was not a traditional villainous team, but rather Chairman Rose, the head of the Macrocosmos Company and the organizer of the Galar Pokemon League. Rose had discovered the dormant Eternatus beneath Galar and had been feeding it wishing stars, fragments of Eternatus' own body, to gradually reawaken it. Rose's motivations were not entirely selfish. He genuinely believed he was acting in Galar's best interests. His research had convinced him that Galar would face an energy crisis 1,000 years in the future, and he believed that Eternatus' infinite energy could solve this problem. However, Rose drastically underestimated Eternatus' power and the danger of awakening it. During the Champion Finals, where the protagonist was set to battle Leon for the championship, Rose activated his plan. Eternatus immediately woke up and the second darkest day would come, the sky turning black as Galar particles flooded the region. Pokemon throughout Galar began to Dynamax uncontrollably, going berserk just as they had 3,000 years ago. Leon attempted to stop Eternatus, but was defeated by the alien Pokemon's overwhelming power. The protagonist and Hop raced to the energy plant where Eternatus had been contained, but even together they could not defeat the creature. Eternatus absorbed all the Dynamax energy in Galar, transforming into its Eternamax form, a titanic version of itself so large that it could barely be comprehended. In this form, Eternatus was invincible, immune to ordinary attacks, but the protagonist remembered the legends Sonia had uncovered. Using the Rusted Sword and Rusted Shield, artifacts connected to the heroes of 3,000 years ago, they called forth Zacian and Zamazenta. The two legendary Pokemon awakened from their slumber in the Slumbering Weald and came to aid the protagonist and Hop. With their help, and together with other trainers from across Galar, the group engaged Eternatus in a max raid battle, slowly weakening the creature until the protagonist could finally capture it in a giant Pokeball. With Eternatus captured, the second darkest day ended. The sky cleared, the berserk Dynamaxed Pokemon returned to normal, and peace was restored to Galar. Chairman Rose was arrested for his reckless actions, even though his intentions had not been entirely malicious. The protagonist went on to defeat Leon and become the new champion of Galar. In the aftermath, two brothers named Swordward and Shielbert, who claimed to be descendants of the ancient Galarian monarchy, attempted to seize control of Zacian and Zamazenta, believing this was their royal right. Their plan failed, and the legendary Pokemon chose to stay with the protagonist and Hop, recognizing them as the true heroes of the modern era. The Crown Tundra, a snowy region of Galar, held additional secrets. Calyrex, a legendary Pokemon that had once ruled over this area, was weakened and needed help to be restored to its former glory. The protagonist aided Calyrex in reuniting with its steed, either Glastrier or Spectrier, and explored the Max Lair, where the concentration of Dynamax energy was so high that legendary Pokemon from across different regions and time periods could be encountered. Peonia, a character exploring the Crown Tundra, suggested that a massive wishing star, possibly the original meteor containing Eternatus, had landed there, creating the Max Lair. Paldea, the open-world adventure. In the Paldea region, several years after the Galar events, three young trainers began their journeys in a non-linear way. Florian, or Juliana, the protagonist, had just moved to Paldea and enrolled at either Naranja or Uva Academy, the prestigious schools founded 805 years ago. Their neighbor Nimona, already a champion-ranked trainer, decided to restart her journey with a new team to have a proper rival experience with the protagonist. The protagonist's adventure was unique in that they could tackle objectives in any order. Three major storylines unfolded simultaneously: the traditional gym challenge to become champion, the Starfall Street storyline dealing with Team Star, and the Path of Legends to help Arven find Herba Mystica. Team Star was not a traditional villainous organization. These students had been bullied severely at the academy and banded together to protect each other, eventually staging a mass walkout. However, the school's administration had hidden records of the bullying and instead portrayed Team Star as the problem, labeling them as delinquent bullies. The protagonist, working with Cassiopeia, later revealed to be Penny, a student who had created Team Star but felt guilty about how things turned out, helped reveal the truth and reintegrate Team Star members back into the academy. Arven's story was more tragic. His parent, Professor Sato or Turo, depending on the version, had become obsessed with Area Zero, the massive crater at the center of Paldea. The professor had discovered that Area Zero contained strange energies and had been working on a dangerous project involving time travel or dimensional travel. Arven's partner Pokemon, Mabosstiff, had been badly injured by a paradox Pokemon from Area Zero, and Arven needed Herba Mystica, extremely rare healing herbs guarded by Titan Pokemon, to heal his companion. The three storylines converged when the protagonist was summoned to Area Zero by Professor Sada or Turo. Descending into the crater, the group discovered the truth. The professor had died in an accident involving the aggressive second Koraidon or Miraidon, and the person who had been communicating with them was an AI duplicate. This AI had been following the original professor's programming, continuing the experiments with a time machine that brought Pokemon from the ancient past or distant future to the present. The AI recognized that the time machine was destabilizing the region and posed an existential threat, but was unable to shut it down due to its programming. The only solution was for someone to defeat the AI in battle, allowing the AI to travel through time to a distant point where it could no longer interfere with the machine's ongoing operation in the present. The protagonist battled and defeated the AI, who then departed through time, and the time machine ceased its uncontrolled operation. In the Hidden Treasures of Area Zero DLC, the protagonist traveled to Kitakami, a region where they learned of the legend of Ogerpon and the Loyal Three. The story that the townspeople believed painted Ogerpon as a villain, and the Loyal Three, Okidogi, Munkadori, and Fezandipiti as heroes, but the truth was the reverse. Ogerpon had been the victim, and the Loyal Three had been the villains who killed Ogerpon's companion and stole its masks. The protagonist helped reveal the truth and befriended Ogerpon. Later, the protagonist was invited to Blueberry Academy in Unova, where they discovered that Kieran, a boy from Kitakami who had become obsessed with Ogerpon and felt betrayed when it chose the protagonist, had become the champion of the BB League through obsessive training. The protagonist defeated Kieran, helping him overcome his unhealthy obsession and heal emotionally. The most significant discovery came when the group traveled to Area Zero's depths and found Terrapagos, the legendary Pokemon that had survived since the crater's formation 2 million years ago by crystallizing itself. Legend ZA, 5 years after the events of the Kalos region. 5 years after the events of Pokemon X and Y, the Kalos region had changed significantly. Lumiose City, the centerpiece of Kalos, had undertaken an ambitious urban redevelopment project to transform the city into a model of harmonious living between humans and Pokemon. This initiative, which would give the game its name, Pokemon Legends ZA, focused on rebuilding and modernizing Lumiose while preserving its historical and cultural significance. The protagonist of this story was a young tourist who arrived in Lumiose City just as this redevelopment was beginning. They quickly became involved in the ZA Royale, a competitive series of Pokemon battles that served as both entertainment and a proving ground for trainers who wanted to contribute to the city's reconstruction. As the protagonist rose through the ranks of the ZA Royale, earning promotions from rank Z to rank A, they discovered that Lumiose City held far more secrets than anyone realized. To understand Legend ZA, we need to start 3,000 years in the past with AZ, because everything in this game traces back to one king's terrible choice and his attempts to atone for it. 3 millennia ago, AZ was a king, caught up in a devastating war that consumed Kalos. Many Pokemon lost their lives, and in the chaos, AZ's beloved Floette, a Pokemon with a unique black flower, was sent to the front lines where she died. Most people grieve and eventually move on. AZ had the resources and knowledge to do something about it. He created a device that could grant life, and he used it to revive his Floette. It worked. She came back. But here's the horrifying truth. AZ was so hurt and traumatized that they had hurt his beloved Floette that he relaunched the ultimate weapon to end the war once and for all. Floette was brought back at the cost of countless other lives. AZ's rage at the war hadn't subsided. He couldn't forgive the world that had hurt the Pokemon he loved, so he transformed his device into the ultimate weapon. The weapon fired a beam of light that reached into the heavens and poured down, burning away everything upon the earth. AZ ended the war by becoming destruction itself, committing genocide to stop the conflict. The war ended, but Floette realized the truth. She understood that the life AZ had given her was stolen from other Pokemon, that thousands or millions had died so she could live. She couldn't bear it. Floette left AZ and wandered alone for 3,000 years. AZ has been alive since before the rise and fall of countless civilizations. He watched empires crumble. Technology evolved from primitive tools to modern innovations. Outlived everyone he ever knew. And through all that time, the one being he loved most wanted nothing to do with him because of what he'd done. But AZ didn't just wander aimlessly. About 2,000 years ago, during his wandering, a man of great power asked for his help with a way to protect Kalos. Instead of making another device that would take from others, AZ decided to make one that would share the eternal life he had given Floette. He called it Ange, and he embedded it into Prism Tower in Lumiose City. Ange was designed as the opposite of the ultimate weapon. Where the ultimate weapon destroyed life, Ange would grant eternal life to all living beings it touched. It was AZ's attempt to give meaning to the curse he had placed on Floette, his way of atoning by creating something that could benefit everyone rather than stealing from them. He planned to activate it after reuniting with Floette, but that day never came. They lived in a time of peace, and Ange remained dormant. Fast forward to 5 years before Legends, Lysandra, leader of Team Flare, discovered the ultimate weapon buried beneath Geosenge Town. His philosophy was that the world was growing too crowded, that resources would run out, and the only way to create a world of beauty was to reduce the number of living things. So he activated the ultimate weapon. There was an explosion. Zygarde, the legendary guardian of Kalos, intervened and used its power to protect all living things in the area from the deadly light, saving even Lysandra himself, but doing so exhausted Zygarde's power. And the weapon's activation had an unintended consequence. It awakened Ange. Ange, sensing danger, began emitting excessive amounts of mega power. This energy started causing wild Pokemon throughout Lumiose City to undergo Rogue Mega Evolution, a state where Pokemon Mega evolve without trainers and experience immense pain and aggression. This is the crisis the entire game revolves around, all because of AZ's original sin 3,000 years ago and Lysandra's actions 5 years ago. Your rival character, Tawny or Urban, depending on your player gender, seems like a typical energetic Pokemon rival when you first meet her. She's filming content for Hotel Z, she's excited about battles, she helps you chase down the Pancham that stole your bag. But very early on, the game drops hints that something deeper is going on. She wears a distinctive jacket that belonged to her mother, and she mentions she came to Lumiose looking for someone. This isn't just a side quest, finding answers about her family is the entire reason she's in Lumiose. The ZA Royale, Team MZ, all of it is secondary to her real mission. Tawny becomes the leader of Team MZ, recruiting you, Naveen, and Lida to compete in the ZA Royale tournament. But she's also dealing with serious financial problems. She borrowed 100,000 Pokédollars from the Rust Syndicate to make promotional videos for Hotel Z. Due to predatory interest rates she didn't notice in the fine print, that debt ballooned to 1,000,000 Pokédollars. Despite her outward confidence and leadership, Tawny is struggling. She's in debt, searching for family she's never met, trying to keep Hotel Z afloat for AZ, who took her in, and leading a team of people all dealing with their own problems. But she never complains, never breaks down. She keeps pushing forward, because that's what leaders do. Her team reflects her role as your rival. She uses the 2 starter Pokemon you didn't choose. So if you pick Totodile, she'll have Chikorita and Tepig. Early on, she adds a Manectric that can Mega Evolve, which becomes her signature Pokemon for most of the mid-game. The entire plot of Pokemon Legends, ZA, revolves around AZ's attempts to reconcile for his original sin, the Tower Ange he built due to Lysandra launching the ultimate weapon for the second time in the events of Pokemon X and Y, activated abruptly. This activation caused Pokemon all throughout Lumiose City to undergo a phenomenon called Rogue Mega Evolution, where they wouldn't even need a trainer to Mega Evolve. And here we also learn something very interesting. Mega Energy lets Pokemon use a powerful version of moves called Plus moves. The game suggests that Plus moves are like Z moves, meaning the Z Crystal phenomenon was also a consequence of the launch of the ultimate weapon by AZ 3,000 years ago. You, the protagonist, calm the rogue Mega Pokemon and climb your way through the ZA Royale, earning everyone's trust and respect. In the climax of the game, the Tower Ange takes over Mega Floette, causing it to go rogue and causing every Pokemon nearby to undergo Rogue Mega Evolution as well. But the protagonist, with the help of Zygarde, who tests you throughout the entire game, is given a small pebble as a token of respect. But it turns out that in the heat of the battle, that gift from Zygarde turns into the first Mega Stone, which can Mega Evolve Zygarde, so you and Mega Zygarde take down the frenzied Angie Tower. After saving the entire city and becoming worthy of Zygarde's trainer, AZ finally finds peace and passes away after 3,000 years. By the post-game Infinite ZA Royale, when you face her as the 15th challenger, she has a full team of 6 Pokemon at level 72, and her final Pokemon is AZ's Floette, the eternal flower form that can Mega Evolve. After you defeat her in that battle, after you've seen her use Mega Floette with its exclusive move Light of Ruin, Emma the detective shows up and says she needs to speak with Tawny privately. They go to Quasartico Incorporated headquarters and President Jet, the CEO of the company funding the urban redevelopment of Lumiose City, asks Tawny about her jacket. Tawny confirms it was a keepsake from her mother, and that's when Jet drops the bomb. That jacket was originally a gift that Jet gave to someone, and she's quite sure that Tawny's mother was her daughter. Tawny's mother worked to develop hologram technology, the same technology that would later be used by Team Flare, and that Quasar Tico used to create the holotech barriers around wild zones. Jet and Tawny's mother had a falling out over the direction of the company, and Tawny's mother left to pursue her own research. She ended up doing work for, or receiving support from Lysandra and Team Flare, which means Tawny's mother was indirectly connected to the organization that nearly destroyed Kalos 5 years ago. Tawny's mother burned herself out from the work, had to go to some faraway region to rest and recover, and based on Tawny's dialogue, she either passed away or is still in that distant region, unable to return. President Jet, feeling responsible for concealing the truth about Prism Tower's threat to the public for so long, announces she's stepping down as CEO of Quasar Tico Incorporated. She asks Tawny, her granddaughter, to take over as CEO to provide continuity to the urban redevelopment project. Tawny is shocked. She's still a teenager or a young adult. She's been running a small team of 4 people, and suddenly she's being asked to run a massive corporation. But she accepts because she knows it's what her mother would have wanted. Tawny realizes that if she becomes CEO, she won't have time to be a Pokemon trainer anymore. She has to give up battling, give up Team MZ, give up the thing that brought her to Lumiose in the first place. So she makes the most selfless decision in the entire game. She gives AZ's Floette to you, the player, along with its Megastone. She trusts you to keep Lumiose safe, to do what AZ would have wanted, to be the trainer she can no longer be. And then she asks you to break the news to Lita and Naveen because she can't bear to do it herself. This is a rival character who doesn't just lose to you in battles, she loses her entire dream of being a trainer. But she does it willingly because she understands that some responsibilities are bigger than personal desires. Now we need to talk about Floette herself, because she's not just AZ's partner Pokemon, she's a fully realized character with her own agency, trauma, and journey. The Floette we're talking about isn't a normal Floette, she's the Eternal Flower form, distinguished by the black flower she carries. When we first meet her in Legend ZA, she appears at night when you and Tawny are being cornered by aggressive trainers in a battle zone. She uses Light of Ruin to protect you, then disappears. As the game progresses, you learn her story through AZ's explanations and files found in Team Flare's underground laboratory. When AZ transformed his life-granting device into the ultimate weapon and used it to end the war by burning Kalos, Floette realized what had happened. She understood that her life had been purchased with the deaths of countless other Pokemon, that AZ had become a monster in his quest to protect her, that she was the reason for genocide, even if indirectly. The guilt and horror drove her to leave AZ and wander the world alone for 3,000 years. Carrying the weight of knowing her existence cost so many others their lives. Floette's ability to use Light of Ruin is thematically perfect because it's a powerful fairy-type attack that deals massive damage, but also heavily damages the user. It's a move that represents self-sacrifice, the pain of existence, how trying to protect others can hurt yourself. Every time Floette uses Light of Ruin, she's essentially saying, I will take the pain, I will bear the cost, I will suffer, so others don't have to. The reason Floette returns to AZ after 3,000 years only happens because the protagonists of X and Y show AZ what a true trainer really is. The ending battle in X and Y opens AZ's eyes to the bond between Pokemon and trainers, which is why Floette returns to AZ after 3,000 years of watching over him from the shadows. When he gets his light back, that's when his beloved Floette comes back to him to stay by his side in his final moments. When Tawny gives Floette to you in the post-game, it's the end of a 3,000-year journey. Floette finally has a partner who proved themselves worthy by choosing to give rather than take, by calming rogue Mega Pokemon, something which AZ would have wanted, by helping people. AZ appears throughout the game as the owner of Hotel Z, impossibly tall, speaking in an archaic, formal way that immediately tells you this person is not from this time. Between the events of X and Y and Legend ZA, Floette returned to AZ after 3,000 years of separation. AZ himself says he no longer has it in him to be a trainer. He's spent 3,000 years carrying guilt and regret. He's tired, he's broken, and he knows he can't be the hero this time. This is why AZ takes you in at Hotel Z, why he gives you his Lucario and a Mega Ring to fight the first Rogue Mega Absol, why he provides you with your starter's Mega Stone. AZ is passing the torch to a new generation. He's finally accepting that his role isn't to be the hero, but to enable others to be heroes. When Tawny becomes CEO and gives you Floette, this is the culmination of AZ's 3,000-year journey. Floette, the Pokemon he sacrificed everything for, now willingly goes with you to continue protecting Lumiose. At the end of the game, AZ finally finds peace. After everything, after 3,000 years of guilt and wandering, AZ dies. The game shows him finally resting, having atoned for his sins. AZ's death is peaceful, quiet, the end of the longest redemption arc in Pokemon history. He doesn't get a fairy tale ending where everything is forgiven and forgotten, but he gets peace knowing that his atonement led to something good, that Lumiose is saved, and that Floette is with someone worthy. AZ, the ancient king from 3,000 years ago, had settled in Lumiose City and was now the owner of Hotel Z, where the protagonist stayed. AZ appeared at peace for the first time in millennia, his Eternal Flower Floette by his side. The two finally reunited and content. He had found purpose in running a hotel and helping travelers, a quiet redemption after his long punishment. However, a new threat emerged in the form of El. As the protagonist investigated, they discovered that El was actually Lysandre, the former leader of Team Flare, who had apparently survived the destruction of the Ultimate Weapon headquarters 5 years earlier. But this was not the Lysandre of 5 years ago. Whether through the effects of using Xerneas' power at the end of Pokemon X, or through some other means, Lysandre had been granted extended life, perhaps not true immortality like AZ, but certainly an unnaturally long lifespan. The experience of surviving the weapon's destruction, being buried alive, and spending years trapped or recovering had fundamentally changed him. Lysandre had come to realize the error of his ways, understanding that his genocidal plans had been monstrous, and that true beauty in the world came not from eliminating those he deemed unworthy, but from helping others grow and improve. Lysandre's goal in Legends ZA was not conquest, but redemption. He genuinely wanted to help Lumiose City succeed in creating a better world, working from behind the scenes under the alias L, because he knew that if his true identity became known, he would be arrested, or worse. Throughout the game, Lysandre provided guidance and assistance to the protagonist, though his methods were sometimes questionable, leading to suspicion about his motives. Xerneas, the life Pokemon, represented the life-giving force that would help the city's parks and natural areas flourish. Yveltal, the destruction Pokemon, represented the necessary cycle of decay and renewal. Zygarde, the order Pokemon, served as the balance between them, maintaining equilibrium in Kalos' ecosystem. When they returned to Hotel Z after capturing both Xerneas and Yveltal, Lysandre revealed himself and challenged the protagonist to battle. After being defeated, Lysandre helped the protagonist locate Zygarde, which existed in multiple forms: 10% form, 50% form, and complete form. The battle against Zygarde was one of the most challenging encounters in the game, with the Pokemon shifting between forms and using devastating attacks. The protagonist succeeded in capturing Zygarde, and Lysandre gave them the Zygarde Cube, an item that allowed controlled transformation between Zygarde's forms. The game's ending was emotionally powerful. After the main story concluded, AZ made a final decision about his long life. For 3,000 years he had been cursed or blessed with immortality, unable to die, forever carrying the guilt of his genocide. But now, reunited with Floette and having witnessed a new generation of trainers who truly embodied the bonds between humans and Pokemon, AZ felt that his penance was complete. The ancient king finally passed away peacefully. The post-game also featured extensive exploration of Lumiose City, including the Lumiose Museum. This museum contained several significant exhibits that revealed connections across time and regions. Most significantly, among the historical artifacts on display was the outfit of Volo, the ancient merchant and antagonist from Pokemon Legends Arceus. The museum's description explicitly stated that Volo himself had donated this clothing to the museum, confirming that Volo had indeed survived for 300 plus years, and had at some point visited Kalos in the modern era. Volo, the man who had tried to overthrow Arceus and remake the world 300 years ago in Hisui, was still alive in the present day. Whether he still harbored his obsessive goals, whether he had changed like Lysandre had, or whether he had simply been wandering like AZ for centuries remained unknown. But his presence in the modern era, confirmed through his donation to the museum, suggested that the story of Volo was far from over. The future, Legends Galar and beyond. As we reach October 2025, the present day in the real world, the Pokemon timeline stretches from the creation of the universe by Arceus through to the recent events in Paldea and Kalos. But the story is not over. Information has leaked about Game Freak's future plans, revealing projects that will continue to expand the Pokemon timeline in new directions. According to these leaks, Pokemon Wind and Waves is scheduled for release in 2026, representing Generation 10. This game will take place in a region inspired by Southeast Asia, featuring procedurally generated, explorable islands and underwater exploration. The game will introduce a new category of Pokemon called Seed Pokemon, and will push the boundaries of open-world design in Pokemon games. This game represents the next step forward in the modern timeline, showing how Pokemon and humans continue to grow and change together. More relevant to our historical timeline is Pokemon Legends Galar, codenamed Project Ringo, scheduled for release in 2027 or beyond. This game will take the Legends formula and ZA and apply it to the Galar region, but with a twist. While Legends Arceus went back 300 years and Legends ZA moved forward 5 years, Legends Galar will leap back 1,000 years into Galar's past. The game will be set during a pivotal era in Galarian history, possibly exploring the time when human civilization was first establishing itself in the region, long before the kingdoms that would later become the monarchy referenced in Sword and Shield. The game's premise involves players creating the first Gigantamax Pokeball, suggesting that the mechanics of Dynamax and the ability to control giant Pokemon were not natural developments but rather technological or mystical innovations created by ancient Galarians. This thousand-year past setting is particularly interesting because it places Legends Galar relatively close in time to several other significant events. 1,000 years ago was when AZ witnessed Mega Rayquaza in Hoenn, and when the Draconids made their prophecy about the future meteor. It was an era when legendary Pokemon were still relatively active, and when the relationship between humans and Pokemon was still being defined. The leaked information about Legends Galar suggests that players will face massive Gigantamax Pokemon in the wild, not as controlled phenomena in stadiums, but as terrifying natural disasters. Early screenshots show encounters with gigantic Pokemon like Gigantamax Coalossal in open areas, their enormous forms dominating the landscape. If Legends Galar maintains the pattern of revealing historical truths that contradict accepted legends, we might learn that the common understanding of Galar's history is inaccurate. Perhaps the two heroes who supposedly defeated Eternatus 3,000 years ago were not from the same time, period, or perhaps there were earlier encounters with Eternatus that have been forgotten. The game might reveal connections between the Darkest Day and events in other regions, finally confirming whether the ultimate weapons firing in Kalos had any role in awakening Eternatus. The Tapestry of Time. The complete Pokemon timeline, from the moment Arceus hatched from an egg in a void of chaos to the present day, spans not just thousands but millions of years. It encompasses the formation of the universe itself, the creation of fundamental forces like time and space, the shaping of the Earth by titanic Pokemon, and the gradual emergence of human civilization and its growing bond with Pokemon. Throughout this timeline, certain themes recur. The danger of power without wisdom appears repeatedly, from AZ's genocide with the ultimate weapon to Lysandra's attempt to use that same weapon, from Team Galactic's attempt to remake the universe to Ghetsis' manipulation of N and legendary dragons. Each generation faces villains or catastrophes that threaten not just a single region, but potentially the entire world, or even reality itself. Yet equally prominent is the theme of redemption and growth. AZ, who committed perhaps the greatest atrocity in Pokemon history, spent 3,000 years atoning and finally found peace. Lysandra, who attempted genocide himself, survived to become a better person. Silver transformed from a Pokemon thief who saw Pokemon as tools into a trainer who understood the importance of bonds. N, raised to believe Pokemon and humans should be separated, learned that genuine partnership was not only possible but beautiful. Even Volo, the obsessed merchant who tried to overthrow Arceus, apparently found some path toward change. The legendary Pokemon that appear throughout this timeline are not merely powerful creatures but embodiments of fundamental forces and concepts. Arceus represents creation itself, the source from which all else flows. Dialga and Palkia are time and space, the stage on which reality plays out. The Aura trio of Kalos represents life, death, and the balance between them. The Tau trio of Unova embodies truth, ideals, and the potential for both to unite. Each legendary Pokemon serves a purpose in the cosmic order, and when humans try to control or exploit them, disaster inevitably follows. The timeline is not linear, but rather a tapestry woven from multiple threads that loop back on themselves. Events in the ancient past influence the present in unexpected ways. The Darkest Day from the same era left wishing stars scattered across Galar that power modern Dynamax technology. Volo's actions 300 years ago in Hisui somehow connect forward to his presence in modern Kalos, though the specifics remain mysterious. Time travelers from the future are pulled into the past to fulfill destinies that shape the future they came from, creating stable time loops where cause and effect become circular. The Pokemon world is also explicitly a multiverse, with multiple timelines branching at key points. The revelation of Team Rainbow Rocket and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon confirmed that there are dimensions where villains succeeded, where Giovanni conquered Kanto, where Cyrus erased emotions from the universe, where Lysandre activated the ultimate weapon. As we look toward the future, both in-universe and in terms of upcoming games, the Pokemon timeline continues to expand. Generation 10 will push the modern timeline forward, showing how the world continues to evolve. And with characters like Volo still alive after more than 1,000 years, with legendary Pokemon who have exist Pokemon timeline script. The most fascinating aspect of the Pokemon timeline is how it mirrors human history and mythology while remaining distinctly its own creation. Unova is explicitly stated to be very far from the other regions, across an ocean, based on a different continent entirely. Its culture, architecture, and even the legendary Pokemon it venerates are distinct from the Japan-inspired regions, suggesting a different cultural lineage. Kalos neighbors both Paldea and likely Galar, with all three regions based on European countries, creating a cluster of connected regions with shared history, as evidenced by the Kalos War, possibly involving Galar, and the proximity between Kalos and Paldea. Alola stands apart as an island region, isolated enough to have developed unique traditions like the Island Challenge, and to have its own guardian deities separate from the legendary Pokemon found elsewhere. Its connection to Ultraspace adds another dimension entirely, suggesting that some regions might have unique relationships with other dimensions or realities. Galar, based on the United Kingdom, has the unique distinction of being the only region where an extraterrestrial Pokemon, Eternatus, crashed and made its home. This alien influence gave Galar the Dynamax phenomenon, making it fundamentally different from other regions in a way that goes beyond cultural differences. And Paldea, with its massive crater at the center and the presence of Paradox Pokemon, hints at temporal or dimensional instabilities that might connect to other regions' mysteries. The mystery of Volo's survival and his apparent millennium-plus lifespan opens fascinating questions. We know AZ was granted immortality through the ultimate weapon's power, specifically through exposure to Xerneas' life-giving energy. But Volo was nowhere near the ultimate weapon when it fired, and his immortality or extended lifespan must have come from a different source. Possibilities include his pact with Giratina granting him extended life, exposure to the space-time distortions he created, or perhaps even intervention by Arceus itself, cursing him to live long enough to witness the consequences of his actions, or to learn the lessons he needed. The parallels between Volo and Lysandra are striking and almost certainly intentional. Both were charismatic figures who believed the world was flawed and needed to be remade. Both sought to use legendary Pokemon to achieve their goals. Both caused tremendous harm in pursuit of their vision of perfection, and apparently both survived their defeats and lived long enough to potentially change and seek redemption. The mural in the Lumiosi Museum suggests Volo underwent a transformation similar to Lysandra's, moving from destruction to a search for growth. This parallel might suggest that Volo and Lysandra are connected in ways beyond the thematic. The fate of various legendary Pokemon across the timeline is worth examining. Many legendary Pokemon appear to be unique, single entities that exist across multiple timelines and can sometimes be encountered in different regions or eras. Others, like the legendary birds or the legendary beasts, might exist as species with multiple individuals, though this remains debated. Some legendaries, like Mewtwo, are explicitly artificial, created through human intervention and genetic power. The relationship between legendary Pokemon and humans has evolved across the timeline. In ancient times, Pokemon like Regigigas and the super ancient trio were feared and worshipped as gods. By the time of Legends Arceus, legendary Pokemon were still revered but also understood to be beings that could be interacted with and, in some cases, partnered with. In the modern era, legendary Pokemon are sought after by trainers, and while they remain rare and powerful, they are no longer seen as untouchable gods, but rather as powerful partners who can choose trainers worthy of them. Throughout the timeline, we see legendary Pokemon responding to specific individuals who demonstrate certain qualities. Arceus chose a specific trainer to pull back through time to Hisui, someone who embodied the potential for strong bonds with Pokemon. The legendary dragons of Unova specifically sought heroes of truth and ideals. Zacian and Zamazenta chose to partner with trainers who demonstrated courage and selflessness in defending Galar. The pattern suggests that legendary Pokemon are not merely powerful, but intelligent and discerning, capable of judging the character of potential partners and choosing to work only with those who meet their standards. The villain teams across the timeline represent an escalation of ambition and danger. Team Rocket and Kanto were simple criminals seeking profit through Pokemon exploitation. Teams Aqua and Magma, in Hoenn, were environmental extremists with ideological goals, but still limited to affecting a single region. Team Galactic and Sinnoh aimed to recreate the entire universe, an ambition that threatened all of reality. Team Plasma in Unova sought to reshape society's relationship with Pokemon through manipulation and control of legendary dragons. Team Flare and Kalos attempted genocide on a global scale using ancient weapons of mass destruction. And in Galar, the antagonist was not a traditional team, but rather a well-meaning individual whose reckless actions nearly caused apocalypse. This escalation mirrors the increasing power and scope of legendary Pokemon encountered. Early threats involved controlling powerful but localized Pokemon. Later threats involved Pokemon capable of affecting entire regions or fundamental forces like time and space. The ultimate threats involved beings like Eternatus or the power to recreate the universe itself. As trainers have grown stronger and more skilled across generations, the threats they face have had to escalate proportionally. The existence of ruins in various regions, ancient structures that predate known history, suggests that there were civilizations in the Pokemon world that rose and fell before the recorded history we follow. The ruins of Alph in Johto, the Abyssal, ruins in Unova, the Reflection Cave in Kalos, the various ruins in Paldea, all of these hint at lost civilizations that had relationships with Pokemon, understood legendary powers, and then vanish for reasons that remain mysterious. The cosmic level of the Pokemon timeline cannot be overstated. This is not merely a story about children collecting monsters and battling in tournaments. It is a story that literally begins with the creation of the universe, involves beings that embody fundamental forces like time, space, and antimatter, and regularly features threats that could destroy reality itself. Yet somehow, this cosmic scope is grounded through the personal relationships between trainers and their Pokemon partners. The fate of the universe has been decided multiple times by the bonds between individual trainers and their Pokemon, by the trust and understanding between humans and their partners. This grounding of cosmic threats and personal relationships is part of what makes the Pokemon timeline so compelling. When Cyrus attempts to erase emotion from the universe, it is not defeated by abstract philosophy, but by trainers whose emotions and bonds with Pokemon prove stronger than his nihilism. When Eternatus threatens to destroy Galar, it is defeated by the cooperation of trainers and legendary Pokemon working together. The message is consistent. The bonds between individuals, the capacity for emotion and connection, these are not weaknesses to be eliminated, but strengths that can overcome any threat. Looking at the complete timeline, we can identify several historical eras. The Creation Era, from the universe's beginning to the emergence of human civilization, spans millions of years and features the formation of fundamental forces and the shaping of the planet by primal Pokemon. The Ancient Era, from early human civilization to about 3,000 years ago, sees humans beginning to interact with Pokemon, building early civilizations, and learning to coexist with the powerful creatures that share their world. The War Era, centered around 3,000 years ago, is defined by the Kalos War and the Darkest Day, two catastrophes that nearly destroyed their respective regions and had lasting consequences that persist to the present day. The Classical Era, from 3,000 years ago to about 300 years ago, sees the development of more stable human societies, the gradual transformation of human-Pokemon relations from fear and worship to partnership and cooperation, and the establishment of traditions and institutions that would shape the modern world. The Transition Era, from 300 years ago to the beginning of the modern timeline, encompasses the events of Legends Arceus and the final development of Pokemon training as a formal practice, the Modern. Spanning from Red's journey to the present day in 2025, covers approximately 15 to 20 years in universe, a remarkably short time given the number of significant events that occur. This era is characterized by rapid technological advancement, the establishment of Pokemon leagues across multiple regions, the rediscovery of Mega Evolution, the management of Dynamax energy, and the revelation of multiple timelines in ultraspace. It is an era of heroes, where each new generation of trainers faces and overcomes threats that previous generations could never have imagined. The future era, yet to unfold in the games but hinted at through leaks and development plans, will continue to expand the timeline both forward into new regions and backward into historical periods not yet explored. And whatever comes after will undoubtedly add new layers of complexity to an already intricate tapestry of history. The question of what makes a hero in the Pokemon timeline is worth considering. Every protagonist across the timeline demonstrates certain common qualities. They show courage in the face of overwhelming danger. They form deep bonds with their Pokemon partners, treating them not as tools, but as friends. They stand against injustice and protect the innocent. They adapt and grow through their challenges, becoming stronger not just in terms of Pokemon battle prowess, but as people. And they inspire others, their actions motivating those around them to be better. The villains of the timeline, similarly, are not simple cartoons but complex figures with motivations that often make sense from their own perspectives. Lysandra genuinely believed he was trying to save the world from resource depletion and conflict, even if his solution was monstrous. Cyrus had been emotionally damaged to the point where he saw all emotion as suffering and believed erasing it would be merciful. N was raised to believe humans and Pokemon should be separated and honestly thought he was helping. Even Getsus, one of the most purely villainous figures in the timeline, believed he was entitled to power and saw Pokemon as tools because that had been his worldview for so long that he could not imagine any other way. As our journey through the Pokemon timeline comes to an end, we stand in October 2025, a point where the documented history extends from the literal birth of the universe through millions of years of geological and biological development, through the rise and fall of ancient civilizations, through catastrophic wars and near apocalypses, through the journeys of numerous heroes and the redemption of villains, to the present day where humanity and Pokemon have achieved a level of partnership and understanding that would have seemed impossible to the ancient Celestica people of Hisui or the war-torn kingdom of AZ. This truth is why AZ found peace after 3,000 years, not because he was forgiven by laws or society, but because Floette forgave him, because a single Pokemon who knew him best and loved him most chose to return to him. It is why Lysandra could find redemption, because the Pokemon he had abused and used still responded to his genuine change of heart. It is why every hero succeeds, because their Pokemon stand with them not out of obligation but out of choice, out of the bonds that make them partners rather than master and servant. As we conclude this journey through the complete Pokemon timeline, from the void before creation to the present day, from Arceus hatching to bring forth existence to trainers exploring a transformed Lumiose city, we are left with a story that is simultaneously cosmic, in scope, and intimately personal. It is a story about the birth of the universe and about a king and his floette. It is about legendary Pokemon that embody fundamental forces and about ordinary trainers who become extraordinary through their bonds with Pokemon. It is about wars that nearly destroyed regions and about friendships that saved the world. The Pokemon timeline is not finished. We will learn more about Volo's fate and whether the prophecy of his redemption came true. We will discover what role the ancient Galarians played in developing Dynamax technology. We will continue to see how the modern world grows and changes, how new regions are discovered, how new legendary Pokemon reveal themselves, and how each new generation of trainers faces challenges that test the bonds between humans and Pokemon. But the core truth will remain constant. The Pokemon world is one where the bonds between individuals, human and Pokemon alike, are the foundation of everything good and right, where cooperation triumphs over domination, where understanding defeats fear, where love is stronger than hate, and where the choice to partner with Pokemon rather than control them makes all the difference. This has been true from the beginning, when Arceus granted consciousness to all living things, and it will remain true into whatever future awaits. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the complete Pokemon timeline. From the swirling chaos before existence to the present day, from legendary Pokemon that shape reality to ordinary trainers who change the world, from ancient wars to modern peace, we have traveled through the entire history of the Pokemon universe. May your own journey, wherever it takes you, be filled with the same spirit of adventure, friendship, and discovery that defines the trainers whose stories we have told. Now go forth, catch them all, and create your own chapter in this ongoing story that spans from the beginning of everything to whatever comes next.